Ruth Johnson's hands trembled as she hoisted another suitcase onto the conveyor belt. The blue fabric of her baggage handler uniform clung to her curvy frame, darkened with sweat despite the cool November air circulating through Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3. She had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight, saving money for the medical bills that kept piling up in her small studio apartment. "I said no, Mr. O'Connor. I will not take this position." The sharp voice cut through the terminal noise like glass breaking. Ruth glanced up from her workstation and saw them near gate B17. A tall white man in an expensive gray suit stood with 3 small children clustered around his legs. The children's faces were pale, their eyes red and swollen. A blonde woman in a cream pantsuit stood before them, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. "Please, Miss Harper. The agency said you were the best." The man's voice cracked. His brown hair was disheveled, his tie loosened. "My children need someone. Anyone. I don't care what the agency told you." The blonde woman stepped back. "I read about you online. Your wife died 6 months ago. These children are clearly traumatized. I'm a professional nanny, not a therapist. Find someone else." Ruth's chest tightened. She knew that kind of rejection. She had lived it for 18 years in 7 different foster homes. Each time the same words. Too difficult. Too much trouble. Not what we expected. The smallest child, a girl who couldn't have been more than 5, began to sob. Her pink jacket was buttoned wrong, her blonde hair tangled. The man knelt down, trying to comfort her, but his hands shook so badly he couldn't even wipe her tears properly. "You're the 4th person to refuse." The man's voice broke completely. "What am I supposed to do? I have a business. I have responsibilities. My children are falling apart and I don't know how to help them. That's not my problem." Ms. Harper turned on her expensive heels and walked away, her suitcase rolling behind her with a sharp clicking sound. Ruth watched the man sink onto a nearby bench, his face in his hands. The 3 children stood in a small cluster, not crying anymore, just staring at nothing. They had the look Ruth recognized too well. The look of children who had stopped expecting anything good. The older girl, maybe 7 years old, wore a green dress that was too thin for November. She put her arm around her sister and whispered something Ruth couldn't hear. A boy the same age, probably her twin, picked at a loose thread on his blue sweater and stared at the floor. Something inside Ruth's chest twisted hard. She thought about walking away. She thought about minding her own business. She thought about every time someone had walked away from her. Instead, she set down the suitcase she was holding and wiped her hands on her uniform pants. Her supervisor, Carl, called after her. "Ruth, your shift isn't over for another 2 hours." "I know." Ruth's voice was steady even though her heart pounded. "I'll be right back." She walked across the terminal floor, her work boots squeaking slightly on the polished tile. The man didn't look up until she was standing right in front of him. "Excuse me, sir." He raised his head slowly. His blue eyes were bloodshot and empty. "If you're here to tell me I need to move, I understand. I just need a minute." "No, sir. I heard what happened with that woman." Ruth's voice came out rougher than she intended. "I heard what you said about your children needing help." The man blinked at her, confused. "Are you with the agency?" "No, sir. I work here. I handle baggage." Ruth felt her cheeks grow warm. She was acutely aware of her worn uniform, her scuffed boots, the way her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail because she couldn't afford the salon. "But I heard you talking about needing someone to care for your kids." The little girl stopped crying and looked at Ruth with wide gray eyes. "I don't understand." The man stood up slowly. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and his expensive suit probably cost more than Ruth made in 3 months. "Are you offering to help?" "I know I'm just a baggage handler." Ruth's voice shook but she kept going. "I know I don't look like what you probably need. I'm not a professional nanny or anything like that. But I grew up in foster care. I know what it's like when nobody wants you. I know what it's like to see people walk away." The man stared at her, his mouth slightly open. "I can cook. I can clean. I'm good with kids because I remember being a kid who needed someone to just stay." Ruth looked directly at the 3 children. The older girl was watching her with an intensity that hurt. "I don't have fancy training or certificates. But I won't walk away. If you need someone who will just show up and care, I can do that. You don't even know us." The man's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't know me either." Ruth straightened her shoulders. "But those babies look like they need somebody right now. And I'm somebody. Have you ever felt invisible, like the world decided you weren't worth noticing?" Ruth felt that way her entire life until she saw 3 children who needed her. If this story touches your heart, Please subscribe and comment below. Tell us about a time someone showed up for you when nobody else would. Your story matters. The older boy spoke for the first time, his voice small and uncertain. Are you going to leave too? Ruth knelt down so she was eye level with him. Her knees protested, but she ignored the pain. What's your name, sweetheart? Finn. The boy's lower lip trembled. That's my sister Bridget. And that's Kara. She's the baby. Well, Finn, Bridget, and Kara, my name is Ruth. She looked each of them in the eye. I won't lie to you. I don't know your daddy yet. I don't know what he needs or what you need. But if he says yes, if he lets me try to help, I promise I won't just disappear. I promise I'll stay as long as you need me. Why? Bridget's voice was hoarse, like she hadn't used it in a long time. Ruth felt tears burn her eyes, but she blinked them back. Because when I was your age, I needed someone to stay. And nobody did. I don't want that for you. The man made a sound like a sob caught in his throat. I can pay you. Whatever you need. I have money. I have a big house. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom. I can triple whatever you make here. I don't need triple. Ruth stood back up, her knees cracking audibly. I need enough to live on and save a little. That's all. You'd really do this? You'd leave your job here and come help us. The man looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. I'd need to give notice. 2 weeks probably. Carl's a good supervisor, I won't leave him short-handed. Ruth glanced back at the baggage area where Carl was watching with raised eyebrows. And I'd need to know your name and where you live. I'm trusting too, you know. You could be anybody. A ghost of a smile crossed the man's face. Patrick O'Connor. I live in Oak Hills, about 40 minutes outside the city. I own O'Connor Development Corporation. You can look me up online if you want to make sure I'm legitimate. Oak Hills. Ruth knew the name. It was one of those wealthy suburbs where the houses all had long driveways and perfect lawns. That's pretty far from anything I know. I know this is crazy. Patrick ran his hand through his hair, making it stick up even more. I know this doesn't make sense. You don't know us. We don't know you. But my children are suffering and I am completely out of options. If you're serious, if you really mean this, then yes. Please, come help us. Ruth looked at the 3 children again. Kara had stopped crying completely and was watching Ruth with something that looked almost like hope. Bridget's hand had loosened its grip on her sister's shoulder. Finn had stopped picking at his sweater. I'm serious. Ruth held out her hand to Patrick. I'll give my notice tomorrow. I can start in 2 weeks. Patrick grabbed her hand and shook it so hard Ruth felt it in her shoulder. His palm was cold and clammy. Thank you. God, thank you. I'll send a car for you. Just tell me where you live. I can take the train. Ruth pulled her hand back gently. Save your money for the kids. Ruth. Patrick's voice was firm for the first time since she'd approached. If you're going to work for me, you need to let me take care of basic things like transportation. Please. Ruth nodded slowly. She wasn't used to accepting help. It felt strange and uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit. Kara tugged on Ruth's uniform sleeve with tiny fingers. Are you really going to come live with us? Ruth knelt down one more time, ignoring her protesting knees. I really am, baby girl. 2 weeks from now I'll be there. And I'll make you breakfast and lunch and dinner. And I'll help with homework and bedtime and anything else you need. Do you know how to braid hair? Kara's voice was so quiet Ruth had to lean in to hear. My hair gets tangled and Daddy doesn't know how to fix it. Ruth felt something crack inside her chest. I know how to braid hair, sweetheart. I'll teach you how to do it yourself too if you want. Bridget moved closer, her green dress swishing around her thin legs. She didn't say anything, but she reached out and touched Ruth's hand. Just for a second. Then she pulled back. It's going to be okay. Ruth didn't know if she was talking to the children or herself. We're going to figure this out together. Patrick pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Let me get your number. And your address. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. Do you need help with moving? Do you have a lot of things? Not much. Ruth thought about her studio apartment with its thrift store furniture and handful of dishes. I can pack light. Bring whatever makes you comfortable. Patrick was typing rapidly into his phone. I want you to feel at home. Home. Ruth had never really had one of those. She had lived in places, slept in beds, eaten at tables. But home was something different. Home was something she had stopped believing in around her 10th birthday. Can I ask you something? Finn stepped forward, his blue eyes serious. Are you going to try to be our new mom? Ruth's breath caught. No, baby. I can't replace your mom. Nobody can do that. I'm just going to be someone who cares about you and helps take care of you. Is that okay? Finn nodded slowly. Yeah, that's okay. I don't want a new mom anyway. I just want someone who stays. I'll stay. Ruth stood up, her decision made and settled in her bones. I promise. As she walked back to the baggage area, Carl met her halfway. What in the world was that about? I just quit, Carl. Well, I'm giving 2 weeks' notice. Ruth picked up her scanner. I'm going to work for that man and take care of his kids. Carl's eyebrows shot up so high they disappeared under his cap. Ruth Johnson, have you lost your mind? You don't know that man from Adam. He could be anybody. He's a man whose children need help. And I can help. Ruth resumed scanning bags, her movements automatic. It's the right thing to do. The right thing to do is keep your steady job with benefits and not run off to be a nanny for some rich stranger. Carl shook his head. I can't believe I'm hearing this. You can't believe it because nobody ever thinks I'm capable of anything important. Ruth's voice was sharper than she intended. Everyone looks at me and sees someone who isn't quite enough. Not thin enough. Not educated enough. Not professional enough. But those babies don't care about any of that. They just need someone who will show up. Carl was quiet for a moment. You really want to do this? I really do. Ruth scanned another bag. More than anything. Then I'll give you a good reference if they ask. Carl squeezed her shoulder. You're one of the best workers I've ever had. Don't let anybody make you feel small. Ruth felt tears sting her eyes again. Thank you, Carl. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She kept glancing over at gate B17, where Patrick sat with his children. He had bought them food from one of the terminal restaurants, but they barely touched it. Instead, they huddled close to him and every few minutes one of them would look over at Ruth. When her shift finally ended, Ruth changed out of her uniform in the employee locker room. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and paused. Her brown skin looked tired under the fluorescent lights. Her curves were emphasized by her worn jeans and faded red sweatshirt. Her natural hair needed attention she couldn't afford to give it. Not fit for any man, she whispered to her reflection. It was what her last foster mother had told her when she aged out of the system at 18. You're too big, too plain, too poor. No man is going to want you. You better learn to take care of yourself. Ruth had believed it for years. She had never dated, never let herself dream of marriage or children or love. She had focused on surviving, on working, on staying invisible and safe. But maybe being not fit for any man meant she was exactly fit for something else. Maybe she was fit for 3 children who needed someone to see them and stay. As Ruth left the terminal, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Patrick O'Connor. Thank you again for what you're doing. My children haven't smiled in 6 months, but Cara just asked me if Miss Ruth really knows how to make pancakes. You've already given us hope. Thank you. Ruth saved the number and typed back carefully. I know how to make pancakes. Tell Cara I'll teach her too. See you in 2 weeks. She hit send and walked out into the cold Chicago night. Behind her, the airport hummed with the sound of people coming and going, always moving, never staying. But Ruth was done running. For the first time in her 32 years, she was going to stay somewhere. She was going to matter to someone. Even if the whole world thought she wasn't fit for anything, 3 children needed her. And that was enough. The black town car pulled up in front of Ruth's apartment building exactly at 9 in the morning. Ruth stood on the cracked sidewalk with 2 battered suitcases and a cardboard box containing everything she owned. Her landlord, Mrs. Chen, stood in the doorway watching with disapproving eyes. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Chen said for the 5th time that morning. Going to live with strange man you just meet at airport. This is how girls disappear. I'll be fine, Mrs. Chen. Ruth hefted 1 suitcase into the trunk that the driver had opened. Mr. O'Connor is a legitimate businessman. I looked him up. Rich men are dangerous men. Mrs. Chen crossed her arms. You call me once a week or I call police. Despite her nervousness, Ruth smiled. I will. I promise. The drive to Oak Hills took 45 minutes. Ruth watched the city give way to suburbs, then to neighborhoods where the houses grew larger and more spaced out. By the time they turned onto Maple Ridge Drive, the homes were practically estates, hidden behind stone walls and tall trees. The car stopped in front of iron gates that swung open automatically. The driveway curved through carefully maintained gardens still green despite November's chill. The house itself was massive, a 3-story colonial painted cream with black shutters. It looked like something from a magazine. Ruth's stomach clenched. This wasn't her world. She didn't belong here. The front door opened before the driver could even get her bags out. Patrick emerged, wearing jeans and a blue sweater that probably cost more than Ruth's entire wardrobe. Behind him, the three children peered out nervously. Ruth. Patrick's smile was genuine but tired. He looked like he hadn't slept well in months. Welcome. Please come in. The entrance hall was enormous, with marble floors and a crystal chandelier hanging from a ceiling that soared 20 feet high. A curved staircase led to the upper floors. Fresh flowers sat in a vase on a table that looked like an antique. Ruth felt very small and very out of place in her discount store jeans and thrift shop jacket. Let me show you to your room. Patrick gestured toward the stairs. It's on the second floor near the children's rooms. I hope that's okay. That's perfect. Ruth's voice sounded strange in the high-ceilinged space. Kara ran forward and grabbed Ruth's hand. Come see my room first. Please. Kara let Ruth get settled. Patrick's voice was gentle but firm. It's okay. Ruth squeezed Kara's small hand. I'd love to see your room. Kara's bedroom was painted soft purple with white furniture. Toys covered most of the floor, but they looked untouched, like decorations rather than playthings. The bed was unmade, the sheets twisted and bunched. I don't like sleeping alone, Kara whispered, looking embarrassed. I know I'm too big for that. I'm 5. Ruth knelt down, ignoring the protest from her knees. You're not too big for anything, baby girl. Some people need company to feel safe. There's nothing wrong with that. Really? Kara's gray eyes were huge in her small face. Really? Ruth stood back up. Now show me your brother and sister's rooms. Finn's room was blue and chaotic, clothes everywhere, homework papers scattered across his desk. Bridget's room was the opposite, everything neat and organized, almost obsessively so. The green walls matched her dress from the airport. Finally, Patrick showed Ruth her own room. It was larger than her entire studio apartment had been. The walls were painted warm beige. A queen-sized bed with a thick blue comforter dominated one wall. There was a dresser, a desk, an armchair by the window. The attached bathroom had a tub and shower, gleaming clean. Is this okay? Patrick hovered in the doorway. I can have it repainted if you don't like the color. It's beautiful. Ruth set her suitcases down carefully, afraid to touch anything. I've never had this much space before. You mentioned you grew up in foster care. Patrick's voice was tentative. If you don't mind me asking, was it difficult? Ruth sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the expensive mattress give slightly under her weight. 7 different homes in 18 years. Some were okay. Some weren't. I learned not to get comfortable anywhere. Patrick was quiet for a moment. These children lost their mother 6 months ago. Car accident, sudden, no warning. Michelle, my wife, she was driving home from a PDA meeting. A drunk driver ran a red light. I'm so sorry. Ruth meant it. She had lost things in her life, but never someone she loved because she had never really had anyone to love. I've tried so hard to keep everything normal for them. Patrick leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion written across his features. But I'm failing. Bridget hasn't spoken more than a few words since the funeral until she talked to you at the airport. Finn gets into fights at school every week. Kara wets the bed every night and has nightmares. And I don't know what I'm doing. You love them. Ruth's voice was firm. That's more than a lot of kids get. Love isn't enough if I can't function. Patrick rubbed his eyes. I have to work. The company employs 300 people. I can't just stop. But every time I leave for the office, I feel like I'm abandoning them. You're not abandoning them. You're providing for them. Ruth stood up. Let me help. That's why I'm here. The nanny agency said I should have contracts and background checks and all sorts of official things. Patrick pulled a folder from under his arm. But honestly, I just need someone who cares. If you want to look these over, sign what makes sense, we can handle the legal stuff later. Ruth took the folder. Inside were employment papers, a very generous salary offer, and a simple contract outlining her responsibilities. This is a lot of money. It's what you're worth. Patrick's voice was firm. You're taking care of the most important people in my life. I'm not going to underpay you. I'll sign. Ruth didn't even read through everything carefully. She had already made her decision in the airport. When do I start? How about after lunch? Let you settle in first. Patrick smiled slightly. Though I should warn you, I can't cook. We've been eating a lot of takeout. I'll cook dinner tonight. Ruth felt herself relax slightly. This was something she knew how to do. Do you have groceries? The housekeeper, Nancy, stocks the kitchen every Monday. There should be plenty. Patrick paused. Nancy comes 3 times a week. She cleans and does laundry. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Is that okay? That's fine. Ruth had never had anyone clean for her before, but she wasn't going to argue. After Patrick left, Ruth unpacked her 2 suitcases and 1 box. Her clothes filled maybe a quarter of the large closet. Her few books and pictures looked lost on the spacious dresser. She took a long shower in the private bathroom, marveling at the water pressure and the fancy soap that smelled like lavender. When she came downstairs, she found the kitchen. It was massive, with white cabinets, granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances that looked brand new. The refrigerator was indeed fully stocked. Ruth started pulling out ingredients. She would make something simple for her first dinner. Baked chicken, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes. Comfort food that filled bellies and hearts. She was chopping carrots when she heard voices from the front of the house. A woman's voice, sharp and angry. "I can't believe you hired someone off the street, Patrick. Have you completely lost your mind?" Ruth set down the knife and walked quietly toward the entrance hall. A thin white woman in her 60s stood there, her silver hair perfectly styled, her navy pantsuit expensive and crisp. She looked at Patrick like he had personally disappointed her. "Catherine, please." Patrick sounded tired. "Ruth is exactly what we need." "Ruth." The woman said the name like it tasted bad. "The baggage handler." "Really, Patrick? Michelle would be horrified." "Michelle isn't here." Patrick's voice cracked. "And our children are suffering." Ruth offered to help when 4 professionals walked away. She probably saw dollar signs. Catherine's lip curled. A poor woman getting access to a rich widower. It's obvious what she's after. Ruth stepped into the entrance hall. "I'm after making sure those children have someone who puts them first." Catherine whirled around. Her blue eyes traveled up and down Ruth's body with obvious disdain. Ruth was acutely aware of her faded jeans, her simple green t-shirt, her curves that strained against the fabric. "And you are?" Catherine's tone was icy. "Ruth Johnson. I'm the new caregiver." Ruth kept her voice steady even though her heart pounded. "Caregiver?" Catherine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what we're calling it? How convenient. A desperate widower, a large empty house, a young woman with nothing to her name." "Catherine." Patrick's voice was sharp. "That's enough. I'm Michelle's mother." Catherine stepped closer to Ruth. "These are my grandchildren. I have every right to question who you're bringing into their lives. Then question me directly." Ruth met Catherine's eyes. "Don't talk about me like I'm not standing right here." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me? You want to know my intentions? Fine. I grew up in foster care. I aged out at 18 with nothing. I've worked 3 jobs at a time just to keep a roof over my head. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be unwanted, to be judged by people who don't even know your name." Ruth's voice stayed calm, but her hands trembled. "Those children looked at me in the airport like I was their last hope. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm not educated or sophisticated or whatever else you think they need. But I know how to show up. I know how to stay. And I will love those children until they believe they're worth loving." The entrance hall was silent. Catherine stared at Ruth with an expression that might have been surprise. "Well?" Catherine's voice was stiff. "We'll see how long this lasts. Most people give up on difficult situations. I don't give up." Ruth turned back toward the kitchen. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have dinner to cook." She heard Catherine's heels click across the marble floor, then the sound of the front door closing. Patrick appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later. "I'm sorry about that." He looked miserable. "Catherine means well, but she's protective. She thinks I'm after your money." Ruth went back to chopping carrots. "I don't blame her. It does look convenient." "I don't think that." Patrick came closer. "You could have asked for twice the salary I offered and I would have paid it. You didn't. You just wanted enough to live on. Because that's all I need." Ruth scraped the carrots into a bowl. "I'm not greedy, Mr. O'Connor. I just want a chance to do something that matters. Please call me Patrick." He leaned against the counter. "And you're already doing something that matters. Car asked me 3 times today if you were really coming. When your car pulled up, she actually smiled." Ruth felt warmth spread through her chest. "She's a sweet girl. They're all sweet. They're just broken right now." Patrick's voice was rough. "Thank you for seeing past the broken parts." Dinner that evening was quiet but pleasant. Ruth set the table in the formal dining room, then decided it was too stiff and moved everything to the kitchen table instead. The children came down when called, moving slowly like they weren't sure what to expect. "It smells good," Finn said cautiously, sliding into a chair. "I hope you like it." Ruth served each child a modest portion. She had learned in foster care that overwhelming kids with food often backfired. Better to start small and let them ask for more. Kara took one bite of mashed potatoes and her eyes went wide. These are really good. My foster mom in the third home I lived in taught me to make them. Ruth served herself last, taking the smallest portion. She was one of the good ones. She taught me everything she knew about cooking before her husband got transferred and I had to move again. Did you have brothers and sisters? Bridget's voice was soft, hesitant. Not really. Sometimes there were other foster kids in the homes, but we usually didn't stay long enough to get close. Ruth cut her chicken carefully. I always wanted siblings though. It must be nice to have people who are with you no matter what. Sometimes they're annoying. Finn grinned at his sisters. Hey. Kara threw a small piece of roll at him. No food throwing. Patrick's voice held a hint of laughter. But nice try, Kara. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Ruth watched the children carefully. They all ate slowly like they weren't used to sitting down for meals together. Bridget pushed her food around more than she ate it. Finn wolfed his down like he was afraid it would disappear. Kara took tiny bites and watched Ruth between each one. Can I ask you something? Finn set down his fork. That lady earlier, Grandma Catherine, she was really mean to you. Why didn't you cry? Ruth considered her answer carefully. Because crying doesn't change anything. And because I've heard worse things from people who mattered more than she does. Who matters to you? Kara's question was innocent but cut deep. Right now? You three. And your dad. Ruth met each of their eyes in turn. I came here to help your family. That means you matter to me more than what anyone else thinks. Even if people in town are mean? Bridget's voice was so quiet Ruth almost missed it. Even then. Ruth smiled at her. I've been the new person, the different person, the unwanted person more times than I can count. I know how to handle mean people. Good. Finn's voice was fierce. Because Grandma Catherine told the neighbors about you. I heard her on the phone before she left. She said you were inappropriate and probably dangerous. Patrick's face went red. She had no right to do that. It doesn't matter. Ruth started clearing plates. Let people think what they want. They'll change their minds when they see you three thriving. But as Ruth washed dishes that night, she wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake. Coming into this wealthy world where she didn't fit, where people like Catherine Walsh could poison the town against her with one phone call. She thought about the children sleeping upstairs. About Kara's nightmares and Finn's anger and Bridget's silence. About Patrick's exhaustion and desperation. She had promised to stay. So she would stay. Even if the whole town of Oak Hills decided she wasn't good enough. Even if Catherine Walsh tried to drive her away. Even if she felt out of place every single day in this big house with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Ruth Johnson had never been enough for anyone. But maybe, just maybe, she could be enough for these three broken children who needed someone to believe in them. She dried the last dish and turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow she would face whatever Oak Hills threw at her. Tonight, she would rest in the knowledge that three children had eaten a home-cooked meal and gone to bed without crying. It was a start. Ruth woke at 5 in the morning, her internal clock still set to airport shifts. She lay in the comfortable bed for a moment, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, reminding herself where she was and why. She dressed in jeans and a red t-shirt, then made her way quietly downstairs. The kitchen was dark and silent. Ruth flipped on the lights and started coffee, then began preparing breakfast. By 6:30 she had made scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, fresh fruit, and toast. She set the kitchen table with care, folding paper napkins because she was afraid to use the cloth ones that looked too expensive to touch. Finn appeared first, drawn by the smell of bacon. His dark hair stuck up in strange directions and his pajamas were wrinkled. What time is it? 6:30. Ruth gestured to a chair. Too early? Dad usually doesn't wake us up until 7:30. Then we eat cereal or toaster pastries in the car on the way to school. Finn sat down cautiously. You made all this? I did. Is that okay? Ruth poured him a glass of orange juice. Yeah, it's just. Mom used to make breakfast like this. Before. Finn's voice got quiet. Dad says he doesn't know how to cook without burning everything. Patrick appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his suit. I heard my name. And is that coffee? Yes, sir. Ruth poured him a cup. I hope you don't mind me starting early. Mind? You're a miracle. Patrick took the coffee gratefully. And please stop calling me sir. Patrick is fine. Bridget came down next, moving silently in her bare feet. She wore purple pajamas and her blonde hair hung in tangles past her shoulders. She stopped when she saw the table full of food. You really know how to cook, she whispered. I really do. Ruth pulled out a chair. Come sit. I saved you the corner seat. I remember you liked corners in the airport. Felt safer, right? Bridget's eyes widened. She nodded and slipped into the chair. Kara was last, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Her pink nightgown had cartoon cats on it. Did I wet the bed again? I don't know, sweetheart. Did you? Ruth asked gently. Kara's lower lip trembled. I didn't mean to. Then we'll change the sheets after breakfast. No big deal. Ruth served Kara a small portion of everything. Accidents happen. That's why we have washing machines. Grandma Catherine says I'm too old to wet the bed. Kara's voice was small. She says I'm being a baby. Ruth felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice calm. Grandma Catherine is wrong. Lots of kids wet the bed when they're going through hard times. It's your body's way of showing stress. It doesn't make you a baby. It makes you human. Kara stared at Ruth like she had just revealed a secret of the universe. They ate breakfast together, and Ruth noticed the small changes from dinner the night before. Bridget ate a little more. Finn asked for seconds. Kara finished everything on her plate. After Patrick left for work and the children went upstairs to dress for school, Ruth tackled Kara's room. The sheets were indeed wet, but Ruth changed them without comment. She opened windows to air out the room and sprayed a light lavender scent she found in the bathroom cabinet. By 7:30, all three children were dressed and ready. Ruth had packed their lunches in the expensive lunch boxes she found in the pantry, including notes in each one. Simple messages: you're brave. You're smart. You're loved. She drove them to school in Patrick's second car, a practical SUV. The elementary school was beautiful, all brick and tall windows with perfectly manicured grounds. Other parents pulled up in luxury vehicles, their children jumping out in designer clothes. I can walk from here, Finn said quickly when Ruth pulled into the drop-off lane. You don't have to get out. Why not? Ruth turned off the engine. Because. Finn looked at his sisters. People will see you. Understanding hit Ruth like a physical blow. You mean people will see that I don't look like the other parents? No. Bridget's voice was fierce. We don't care what you look like. We just don't want them to be mean to you. Ruth's throat tightened. I appreciate that, babies. But I'm a grown woman. I can handle mean people. Come on. She walked all three children to the entrance. Other parents stared. Some whispered. A few smiled politely, but most just looked confused, trying to figure out who Ruth was and why she was with the O'Connor children. Miss Ruth? Kara grabbed her hand at the door. Will you be here when school ends? I'll be right here at 3 o'clock. Ruth squeezed her hand. I promise. Inside the school, a teacher approached. She was young, white, with perfect blonde hair and a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hello. I'm Miss Peterson, Kara's teacher. And you are? Ruth Johnson. I'm the children's new caregiver. Ruth kept her voice professional. Oh. Miss Peterson's smile froze. I see. Well, Kara has been having some difficulty adjusting this year. Perhaps you and Mr. O'Connor could come in for a conference? Of course. I'll let him know. Ruth knelt down to say goodbye to Kara. Have a good day, baby girl. Remember, you're brave. After the children disappeared into their classrooms, Ruth walked back to the SUV. A woman in expensive yoga clothes and diamond earrings blocked her path. Excuse me. Are you the new nanny? The woman's tone made nanny sound like an insult. I'm the caregiver, yes. Ruth tried to move around her. I'm Jennifer Matthews. My daughter Sophia is in Bridget's class. Jennifer looked Ruth up and down. I just want you to know that we all loved Michelle. She was part of our community. She volunteered at every school event. She was one of us. I'm not trying to replace her. Ruth kept her voice level. I'm just trying to help the children. Those poor babies. Jennifer's voice dripped with false sympathy. Losing their mother and then having to adjust to, well, someone so different from what they're used to. Different how? Ruth crossed her arms. Jennifer blinked, not expecting the direct question. I just meant, you know. Michelle was very involved. Very educated. Very refined. And you think I'm none of those things because of how I look. Ruth's voice was soft but steely. Let me be clear, Mrs. Matthews. I don't care what you think of me. I care about 3 children who need someone to show up for them every single day. If you have a problem with that, take it up with Mr. O'Connor. Otherwise, please get out of my way. Jennifer's mouth dropped open. Ruth walked around her and got into the SUV. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. She had known this would be hard, but the reality of it hit differently. These people looked at her and saw someone who didn't belong. Someone who was too dark, too curvy, too poor, too different. but she had promised to stay. So she would stay. Ruth spent the morning cleaning the house, even though Nancy the housekeeper was scheduled for the next day. She vacuumed and dusted and organized. She found photographs of Michelle in almost every room and forced herself to look at them. Michelle had been beautiful. Thin and blonde with a perfect smile. She wore expensive clothes and looked comfortable in them. In every picture she looked like she belonged exactly where she was. Ruth looked nothing like her. Would never look like her. Would never be her. At lunch, she made herself a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table, feeling small and out of place despite the morning's confrontation with Jennifer Matthews. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patrick. How did school drop-off go? Ruth considered lying, then decided against it. Fine. Met some of the other parents. They're protective of the children. That's a nice way of saying they were rude to you. Catherine called me this morning. Apparently she's been telling everyone in town that I hired someone inappropriate. I'm sorry. Not your fault. I can handle it. You shouldn't have to handle it. But thank you for staying anyway. Ruth set down her phone and went back to work. She organized the children's rooms, throwing away broken toys and making piles for donation. She found a photo album in Bridget's room, filled with pictures of Michelle. She sat on Bridget's perfectly made bed and flipped through the pages. Michelle reading to the children. Michelle at their birthday parties. Michelle and Patrick on their wedding day, both so young and happy. She was pretty, wasn't she? Ruth jumped. Bridget stood in the doorway. What are you doing home? It's only 1 o'clock. I felt sick. The nurse called Dad, but he was in a meeting, so they called you. Didn't you get the message? Bridget came into the room slowly. Ruth grabbed her phone and saw 3 missed calls. Oh no. I'm so sorry. I was cleaning and didn't hear it. Are you okay? I'm not really sick. Bridget sat on the bed next to Ruth. I just wanted to come home. School is hard. Because of your mom? Ruth asked gently. Because everyone looks at me like I'm broken. Bridget's voice cracked. They whisper about me in the bathroom. They say I'm weird because I don't talk much anymore. Sophie Matthews told everyone that I'm crazy, and that's why my mom died, because she was stressed from having a crazy daughter. Ruth felt rage boil in her chest. Sophie Matthews needs to be educated on what crazy actually means. And so does her mother. You met Mrs. Matthews? Bridget looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I did. This morning. She was very concerned about how different I am from your mom. Ruth closed the photo album carefully. Your mom was beautiful. I can see why people loved her. Do you think we're bad for wanting you here instead of her? Bridget's question was so quiet Ruth almost missed it. Oh baby. Ruth pulled Bridget into a hug, feeling the girl's thin shoulders shake. You're not bad. You're not choosing me instead of her. You can love your mom and still need help from someone else. Those things don't cancel each other out. I miss her so much. Bridget sobbed into Ruth's shoulder. But I'm also mad at her for leaving. Does that make me terrible? It makes you human. Ruth stroked Bridget's hair. When I was in foster care, I used to get so angry at my birth mother. I didn't even know her, but I was furious that she gave me up. The anger felt so much easier than the sadness. Did you ever stop being angry? Bridget pulled back, wiping her eyes. Eventually. I realized she probably did the best she could with what she had. Your mom didn't choose to leave you. That drunk driver took her away. You can be angry about that without being angry at her. Ruth wiped Bridget's tears with her thumb. And it's okay to still be sad sometimes. Mrs. Matthews said you don't belong here. She said you're trying to take my mom's place. Bridget's voice was small. I'm not trying to take anyone's place. Ruth held Bridget's face gently. Your mom's place is in your heart and nobody can take that. I'm just trying to make a different place. A place where you can be sad or angry or happy or whatever you need to be. A place where you're safe. I like that you're here. Bridget's admission was whispered. Does that mean I didn't love my mom enough? No, sweetheart. It means you're strong enough to let someone new help you. That takes courage. Ruth stood up. Now, since you're home early, how about we do something your mom used to do? What was her favorite thing? Bridget thought for a moment. She used to braid my hair while we watched movies. Every Sunday afternoon. Then that's what we'll do. Ruth led Bridget downstairs. You pick the movie. I'll get my comb and some hair ties. They spent the afternoon on the couch. Ruth carefully braided Bridget's long blonde hair while they watched an animated movie about a girl and her dragon. Bridget laughed at the funny parts, something Ruth suspected she hadn't done in months. When 3 o'clock came, Ruth left Bridget watching the movie and drove to pick up Finn and Kara. Both children looked exhausted. How was your day? Ruth asked as they buckled into the SUV. Matthew Henderson called me a freak because my mom's dead. Finn's voice was flat. So I punched him. Oh, Finn. Ruth sighed. The principal called you but you didn't answer. So he called Dad. Finn looked out the window. Dad was mad. I'm suspended tomorrow. I'm sorry I missed the call. Ruth pulled out of the parking lot. But we'll talk about the punching when we get home. Are you going to be like Dad and say I shouldn't fight? Finn's voice was challenging. I'm going to say that punching people doesn't solve the problem. It just makes everyone think you're the problem. Ruth glanced at him in the rearview mirror. But I also understand why you did it. You do. Finn sounded surprised. I do. When people say cruel things, it hurts. And sometimes hitting back feels like the only way to make it stop hurting. Ruth turned onto their street. But it doesn't actually stop anything. It just gives them more ammunition to hurt you with. Then what am I supposed to do? Finn's voice cracked. Just let them say whatever they want? No. You tell a teacher. You walk away. You come home and tell me or your dad and we handle it. Ruth pulled into the driveway. You're not alone anymore, Finn. You don't have to fight these battles by yourself. That evening, Ruth cooked spaghetti and meatballs. Patrick came home just as she was serving dinner, his tie loosened and his face drawn. I heard about school. He sat down heavily at the table. I'm sorry I was in meetings all afternoon. I should have been available. It's my fault. Ruth set a plate in front of him. I was cleaning and didn't hear my phone. Nobody's at fault except the people who are cruel to children who are grieving. Patrick looked at Finn. Son, I know you're angry. But you can't punch people. I know. Finn stared at his plate. I'm sorry. Tomorrow you're suspended, but you're not going to sit around playing video games. You're going to spend the day with Ruth, and together you're going to figure out better ways to handle your anger. Patrick's voice was firm but kind. Understood. Yes, sir. Finn's voice was small. After dinner, Ruth helped Kara with her bath. The little girl was quiet, playing with a rubber duck in the warm water. Are you mad at Finn for punching that boy? Kara asked suddenly. No, baby. I'm sad that he felt like he had no other choice. Ruth shampooed Kara's hair gently. Sophie Matthews told me today that you're fat and poor and you only want Daddy's money. Kara's voice was matter-of-fact. I told her to shut up. Ruth's hand stilled. What did she say then? She said her mom says you're going to ruin our family. And that we should tell Daddy to fire you. Kara looked up with worried eyes. Are you going to get fired? I don't know, sweetheart. Ruth rinsed Kara's hair carefully. But I'm not going to leave unless your daddy tells me to. And even then, I'll make sure you know how to reach me if you need me. Promise? Kara's voice was desperate. I promise. Ruth wrapped her in a towel. Now let's get you into pajamas. Later, after all three children were in bed, Ruth sat in her room and cried. She cried for Finn's anger and Bridget's grief and Kara's fear. She cried for herself, for feeling so out of place in this world of wealth and judgment. But mostly she cried because in just 2 days, these children had grabbed hold of her heart. And she knew that no matter how hard the town tried to push her out, no matter how many Jennifer Matthews types said she didn't belong, she wasn't going anywhere. She had promised to stay. And Ruth Johnson kept her promises. The doorbell rang at 8 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Ruth had moved into the O'Connor house. She had just finished making breakfast and was packing school lunches when the sharp sound echoed through the entrance hall. Through the front door's side window, Ruth saw a woman in a gray pantsuit holding a briefcase and clipboard. Her stomach dropped. She knew that look. That official, assessing look that meant trouble. Can I help you? Ruth opened the door cautiously. Good morning. I'm Beverly Thompson from the Department of Children and Family Services. The woman's voice was professional but not unkind. She held up identification. I'm here to conduct a home visit regarding the O'Connor children. A home visit? Ruth's mouth went dry. Why? We received a complaint about the children's living conditions and care. Beverly's eyes were sharp, taking in Ruth's appearance, her faded jeans and simple blue t-shirt. May I come in? Ruth stepped back, her mind racing. The children are eating breakfast before school. Their father is upstairs getting ready for work. Perfect. I'd like to speak with all of you. Beverly entered the house, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Her gaze swept the entrance hall, noting every detail. Patrick came down the stairs, his suit jacket still off, his tie hanging loose. Who was at the door? Patrick O'Connor? Beverly extended her hand. Beverly Thompson, DCFS. I need to speak with you about your children. Patrick's face went pale. DCFS? What's happened? Are my children in danger? That's what I'm here to determine. Beverly's voice remained neutral. We received a complaint that the children are being cared for by someone unqualified, and that their living conditions may be neglectful. That's ridiculous. Patrick's voice rose. My children are fine. Ruth is doing an excellent job. I'm sure she is. Beverly's tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. But I need to verify that for myself. It's procedure. Ruth felt like she was going to be sick. She knew who had filed the complaint. Catherine Walsh. The children's grandmother had finally made good on her threat. Beverly spent the next hour interviewing everyone separately. She checked the children's rooms, noting Kara's accidents and the plastic sheets Ruth had put on the mattress. She inspected the kitchen, the bathrooms, the children's clothes. She asked the children dozens of questions about Ruth, about their father, about how they felt. By 9 o'clock, Patrick was late for work and visibly furious. The children were confused and upset. Ruth felt like every worst fear she'd ever had was coming true. I'll need to speak with Ruth privately now. Beverly gestured toward the living room. Ruth followed her, her legs shaking. They sat on the expensive cream-colored couch that Ruth had been afraid to sit on until that moment. Tell me about your background. Beverly pulled out her clipboard. I grew up in foster care. 7 homes between ages 4 and 18. Ruth's voice was steady even though her hands trembled in her lap. I aged out at 18, got my GED, worked multiple jobs. I was a baggage handler at O'Hare when I met Mr. O'Connor. No college education? Beverly wrote something down. No, ma'am. I couldn't afford it. Any training in childcare? Early childhood development? Psychology? No, ma'am. Just experience from being a child who needed care. Ruth met Beverly's eyes directly. I know what it feels like to be scared and sad and alone. I know how to help children feel safe. The complaint suggests you're physically unfit to care for active children due to your weight. Beverly's voice remained neutral, but Ruth felt the judgment underneath. I keep up with 3 children just fine. Ruth's voice was calm. I take them to school, cook their meals, help with homework, play with them. My weight hasn't affected my ability to do any of that. The complaint also suggests that you have an inappropriate relationship with Mr. O'Connor. That you're using the children to get access to his money. Beverly watched Ruth's reaction carefully. Ruth laughed bitterly. I've been here 3 weeks. Mr. O'Connor and I have barely spoken outside of discussions about his children. I have my own room. I do my job. That's all. Yet you gave up a stable job to move in here very quickly after meeting him. Beverly tapped her pen against the clipboard. That raises questions. I gave up a job where I worked myself half to death for minimum wage because I saw 3 children who needed help. Ruth's voice grew stronger. I saw myself in those babies. I saw what happens when nobody cares enough to stay. So I stayed. Beverly was quiet for a moment. The children speak very highly of you. All 3 of them. That's actually unusual in these situations. Because I actually care about them. Ruth leaned forward. Look, I know what this looks like. I know I'm not what anyone expected. I'm not thin or educated or sophisticated. I grew up poor and I'm still poor. But I love those children like they're my own. I would do anything to protect them. Including giving up your independence to live in a stranger's house? Beverly's question was sharp. It's not about independence. It's about purpose. Ruth stood up, suddenly too agitated to sit. I spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough. Too big, too poor, too uneducated, too black, too everything that didn't fit what people wanted. Those children don't care about any of that. They just care that I show up every single day and love them. So yes, I gave up my independence. Because loving them matters more than my pride. Beverly studied Ruth for a long moment. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen every kind of situation you can imagine. And I've gotten very good at spotting when something's wrong. Ruth's heart sank. And those children are happier than they've been in months, according to their teachers. Bridget is speaking in full sentences again. Finn's been in 0 fights since you started. Kara's bedwetting is decreasing. Beverly stood up. The house is clean. The children are fed and clothed and clearly loved. Mr. O'Connor seems stable and appropriate. But Ruth could hear the but coming. But I have to take this complaint seriously. I'll be making follow-up visits over the next few weeks. Unannounced. Beverly walked toward the door. I need to make sure this situation is truly in the children's best interest. What happens if you decide it's not? Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. Then I recommend changes. In severe cases, temporary removal of the children until conditions improve. Beverly's voice softened slightly. But I don't think we're looking at that here. I think we're looking at a grandmother who's grieving and afraid, taking it out on the person she sees as a threat. Catherine Walsh filed the complaint. It wasn't a question. I can't confirm that. But between you and me? Beverly's expression became almost kind. Focus on the children. Document everything you do for them. Keep records of meals, activities, doctor's appointments, everything. Make it impossible for anyone to claim you're neglectful. After Beverly left, Ruth sat on the couch and put her head in her hands. She heard Patrick enter the room but couldn't look up. I'm going to kill Catherine. Patrick's voice was tight with rage. How dare she put my children through this? She's scared. Ruth finally looked up. She lost her daughter. Now she thinks she's losing her grandchildren to someone she doesn't understand. That doesn't give her the right to accuse you of being unfit. Patrick sat next to Ruth. You're the best thing that's happened to this family in months. I'm also the easiest target. Ruth's voice was hollow. I'm everything people love to judge. Fat, poor, black, uneducated. I'm a walking stereotype of someone who doesn't belong in your world. You belong here because my children need you. Patrick's voice was fierce. I don't care what Catherine thinks. I don't care what the town thinks. You're staying. What if Beverly decides I'm not fit? What if they take the children? Ruth felt tears burn her eyes. I couldn't bear that. They're not taking my children. And you're not going anywhere. Patrick grabbed her hand. We'll document everything. We'll be so perfect that even Catherine can't find fault. The next 3 weeks were the most stressful of Ruth's life. She kept meticulous records of every meal, every activity, every interaction with the children. She took pictures of school projects and saved every homework assignment. She noted every time Kara stayed dry through the night, every time Finn came home without getting into trouble, every time Bridget spoke without being prompted. Beverly showed up 3 more times, always unannounced. Once at dinner time, once early in the morning, once on a Saturday afternoon when they were all playing board games in the living room. Each visit was scrutiny incarnate. Beverly checked the refrigerator, looked at the children's clothes, watched how Ruth and Patrick interacted with each other and the children. She asked the children repeatedly if they felt safe, if Ruth ever yelled at them, if they ever went to bed hungry, if anyone hurt them. The stress affected everyone. Patrick became tense and snappish at work. The children grew quiet and watchful, afraid that saying the wrong thing would make Ruth disappear. Ruth barely slept, terrified that she would make a mistake that would cost the family everything. Catherine Walsh didn't visit, but her presence hung over the house like a storm cloud. Patrick tried calling her multiple times but she wouldn't answer. She sent a single text. I'm protecting my grandchildren from a gold digger. Someone has to. On a Thursday afternoon, Ruth took the children to the park. It was a beautiful November day, unseasonably warm. Bridget and Kara played on the swings while Finn climbed the jungle gym. Ruth sat on a bench, watching them, trying to ignore the other mothers who whispered and pointed. She had gotten used to that. What she wasn't prepared for was when Jennifer Matthews walked over and sat down beside her. Hello, Ruth. Jennifer's voice was falsely sweet. Mrs. Matthews. Ruth kept her eyes on the children. I heard about the DCFS investigation. The whole town has. Jennifer examined her perfect manicure. It must be so stressful for you. The children are fine. That's all that matters. Ruth's voice was flat. Are they though? I mean, having strangers come to your house, asking invasive questions. That can't be good for kids who are already traumatized. Jennifer's voice held false concern. Maybe it would be better if you just left. Let them hire someone more appropriate. Someone like you? Ruth finally looked at Jennifer. Well, I do have a degree in education. And I'm part of this community. I understand how things work here. Jennifer's smile was sharp. You have to admit you're rather out of your depth. What I admit is that those children were falling apart before I came. Ruth stood up. And now they're healing. So whatever you and your friend Catherine Walsh think, the results speak for themselves. Catherine is just looking out for her grandchildren. Someone has to, since Patrick clearly isn't thinking straight. Jennifer stood as well. A man doesn't hire someone like you unless he's desperate or stupid. And Patrick O'Connor isn't stupid. Someone like me. Ruth kept her voice level. What exactly does that mean? You know what it means. Jennifer's mask slipped. You don't belong here. You don't belong in that house with those children in this town. You're taking advantage of a vulnerable family, and eventually Patrick will see that. The only person taking advantage of anyone is you, using children's grief to make yourself feel superior. Ruth called to the kids. Bridget, Finn, Kara. Time to go home. The children came running. Kara grabbed Ruth's hand immediately. Finn positioned himself between Ruth and Jennifer like a small guard dog. Bridget just stared at Jennifer with cold eyes. Your grandmother filed a complaint with DCFS. Ruth didn't believe in hiding truth from children. So we've had to have some people come check on us. Make sure everyone is safe and happy. We are safe and happy. Bridget's voice was clear and strong. We're happy because Ruth is with us. Tell that to Grandma Catherine next time you see her. Ruth led the children away from Jennifer Matthews without looking back. That evening, Beverly Thompson made her fourth unannounced visit. But this time she brought news. I'm closing the complaint. Beverly's voice held satisfaction. I've observed this family extensively. The children are thriving. The home is appropriate. And frankly, Mrs. Walsh admitted under questioning that her complaint was based on personal feelings rather than actual concerns about the children's welfare. Patrick sank onto the couch in relief. Thank God. However, Beverly held up her hand. I'm required to inform Mrs. Walsh that making false reports to DCFS is a serious offense. If she tries this again, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Ruth asked. Restricted visitation with the children, for one thing. The courts don't look kindly on grandparents who weaponize child protective services. Beverly closed her briefcase. But I don't think she'll try again. She seemed genuinely shocked when I explained that her actions could have resulted in the children being removed from their father's care. After Beverly left, Patrick immediately called Catherine. Ruth could hear his voice echoing from the study, angry and hurt. She heard words like betrayal, and grandchildren, and apologize. She focused instead on getting the children ready for bed. All three were exhausted from weeks of stress. Kara fell asleep while Ruth was reading her a story. Finn hugged Ruth extra tight when she said goodnight. Bridget whispered, "Thank you for staying," before closing her eyes. Ruth sat in her room afterward, staring at the ceiling. She had survived the investigation. The complaint was closed. Beverly Thompson had found nothing wrong. But Ruth knew this wasn't over. Catherine Walsh might have backed down, but the town of Oak Hills had made its position clear. Ruth was an outsider. She didn't belong. She thought about leaving. It would be easier for everyone. Patrick could find someone the town approved of. Someone educated and professional and acceptable. But then she thought about Kara's nightmares getting less frequent. About Finn coming home from school with a smile instead of bloody knuckles. About Bridget singing in the shower that morning, the first time Ruth had heard her sing since arriving. She had promised to stay. And despite everything Catherine Walsh and Jennifer Matthews and the entire town threw at her, Ruth was going to keep that promise. The children needed her. And that was enough. It happened on a Tuesday evening, exactly 1 month after Ruth had moved into the O'Connor house. She was making dinner, stirring pasta sauce and checking on chicken in the oven, when the world suddenly tilted sideways. Ruth grabbed the counter, her vision blurring. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor. She tried to call for help, but her mouth wouldn't form words. Her legs buckled and she felt herself falling into darkness. She woke up to bright lights and the smell of antiseptic. Hospital. She was in a hospital. Ruth tried to sit up, but a firm hand pressed her shoulder back down. Easy now. You gave everyone quite a scare. A nurse's face swam into view, kind and professional. I'm Teresa. You're at Oak Hills Medical Center. The children. Ruth's voice came out as a croak. Where are the children? In the waiting room with their father. They're fine. Teresa adjusted something on the floor in Ruth's arm. You collapsed. Your blood sugar was dangerously high. Over 500. 500. Ruth's mind struggled to process. That's not possible. I feel fine. You don't feel fine, honey. You're just used to feeling bad. Teresa's voice was gentle but firm. When was the last time you saw a doctor? Ruth tried to remember. Maybe 5 years? I couldn't afford it. I didn't have insurance until Patrick hired me. Well, Dr. Martinez wants to run some tests, but he's pretty sure you have type 2 diabetes. Probably have had it for a while, untreated. Teresa checked Ruth's blood pressure. Has anyone in your family had diabetes? I don't know. I grew up in foster care. I don't know anything about my birth family's medical history. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. Am I going to die? Not today. Teresa smiled. But you need treatment. Medication, diet changes, regular monitoring. This is serious, Ruth. You could have gone into a diabetic coma. Patrick appeared in the doorway, his face haggard. Behind him, 3 worried faces peered in. Can we see her? 5 minutes. She needs rest. Teresa stepped out. The children rushed in. Kara climbed onto the bed, careful of the 4-line. Finn grabbed Ruth's hand. Bridget stood at the foot of the bed, tears streaming down her face. You scared us so bad. Bridget's voice broke. You were just on the floor and you wouldn't wake up and I thought you were dead like Mom. I'm sorry, baby. Ruth reached for her with her free hand. I didn't know I was sick. I thought I was just tired. The doctor says you haven't been taking care of yourself. Patrick's voice held accusation and fear in equal measure. He looked at your medical records. Or rather, your complete lack of medical records. Ruth, when was the last time you had a checkup? I told you. About 5 years ago. Free clinic. Ruth felt defensive. I couldn't afford regular doctor visits. I barely afforded food and rent. But you have insurance now. You've had it for a month. Why didn't you schedule an appointment? Patrick sat in the chair beside the bed, his exhaustion evident. Because I was busy taking care of your children. Ruth's voice rose slightly. Because I was cooking and cleaning and doing school drop-offs and pickups and homework help and everything else that needed doing. When exactly was I supposed to fit in a doctor's appointment? You're supposed to take care of yourself too. Patrick's voice cracked. What would have happened if you'd collapsed while driving the kids to school? What if you'd been alone with them and gone into a coma? Ruth, you could have died. But I didn't. Ruth felt tears slide down her face. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're sick. And you've been sick for who knows how long because you don't think you're worth taking care of. Patrick's voice broke completely. God, Ruth. Don't you understand? We need you. The children need you. You can't just run yourself into the ground. I didn't mean to. Ruth looked at the 3 children, all staring at her with frightened eyes. I'm sorry I scared you, babies. The doctor wants to keep you overnight for observation. Patrick stood up. I'll take the kids home, make sure they eat and get to bed. Then I'm coming back here. You don't have to do that. Ruth protested weakly. Yes, I do. Patrick's voice was firm. Because that's what people do when they care about someone. They show up. After Patrick and the children left, Dr. Martinez came in. He was a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Ms. Johnson, we need to have a serious talk about your health. He pulled up a chair. Your blood sugar levels indicate you've had uncontrolled diabetes for quite some time. Your A1C is 11.2. That's dangerously high. What does that mean? Ruth asked. It means your body isn't processing glucose properly, and over time this causes damage to your blood vessels, nerves, kidneys, eyes, and heart. Dr. Martinez spoke clearly and slowly. Left untreated, diabetes can lead to blindness, kidney failure, amputations, heart attacks, strokes. But the good news is, with proper treatment and lifestyle changes, you can manage this condition and live a long, healthy life. Treatment means medication? Ruth thought about the cost even with insurance. Yes, I'm starting you on metformin. It's a standard first-line treatment and your insurance will cover it. Dr. Martinez wrote something on his tablet. But medication alone isn't enough. You need to make changes. Lose some weight, exercise regularly, monitor your blood sugar, eat a balanced diet. I cook healthy meals for the children. Ruth felt defensive again. And then what do you eat? Dr. Martinez's voice was kind but challenging. Let me guess. You serve them first, make sure they have enough, then you eat whatever's left. Maybe you skip meals entirely because you're too busy or too tired or you don't think it matters. Ruth was silent because he was exactly right. Ruth, you spent your whole life in situations where you had to put everyone else first just to survive. But you're not just surviving anymore. You have a good job, health insurance, a stable home. You're allowed to take care of yourself now. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. In fact, you have to take care of yourself. Those children you love? They need you healthy and alive, not running yourself into the ground. I don't know how to put myself first. Ruth's voice was small. It feels wrong. Selfish. It's not selfish to take care of your health. It's responsible. Dr. Martinez handed her some papers. I'm referring you to an endocrinologist for specialized diabetes care. I'm also recommending you see a therapist. These patterns you have, putting everyone else first, believing you're not worth care, those are things you need to work through. I can't afford therapy even with insurance. Ruth looked at the papers without really seeing them. Mr. O'Connor's insurance plan has excellent mental health coverage. It will cost you very little. Dr. Martinez stood up. Use it, please. That night, alone in the hospital room, Ruth thought about everything Dr. Martinez had said. She thought about growing up in foster homes where resources were scarce and she always got what was left over. She thought about working 3 jobs and living on ramen noodles and day-old bread. She thought about believing that her needs didn't matter as much as everyone else's. She thought about Kara asking if she was going to die. About Bridget crying that she couldn't lose Ruth like she'd lost her mother. About Finn's small hand gripping hers like he was afraid to let go. Patrick returned around 10 o'clock, carrying a small bag. I brought you some things from home. Pajamas, your toothbrush, your phone charger. You didn't have to come back. Ruth's voice was thick with unshed tears. Yes, I did. Patrick sat in the chair he'd occupied earlier. Ruth, we need to talk about something. The hospital social worker told me some things about your financial situation. Ruth's stomach dropped. What things? That you've been sending more than half your paycheck to a fund for foster children. That you're still living like you're barely scraping by even though I'm paying you well. Patrick's voice was gentle. The social worker was concerned that you might be in financial trouble. I'm not in trouble. I'm just helping kids who need it. Ruth looked away. I know what it's like to age out of foster care with nothing. If I can help even a few kids avoid that, it's worth it. It's incredibly generous. It's also incredibly self-destructive. Patrick leaned forward. Ruth, you collapsed from an untreated illness because you couldn't afford medical care in the past and didn't prioritize it once you could. You're giving away money you need for yourself because you don't think you deserve to keep it. I have everything I need. Ruth's voice was defensive. Do you? Or are you just used to having nothing? Patrick's question hung in the air. When was the last time you bought yourself new clothes? Or shoes? Or did anything just because it made you happy? Ruth couldn't answer because she couldn't remember. Here's what we're going to do. Patrick pulled out his phone. I'm doubling your salary effective immediately. And before you argue, this is non-negotiable. You're not just a caregiver anymore, you're family. You take care of my children like they're your own. You deserve to be compensated fairly. Patrick, no. Ruth tried to protest. That's too much. It's not nearly enough for what you do. Patrick's voice was firm. And you're going to use that extra money to take care of yourself. Medical appointments. Therapy. New clothes. Whatever you need. The foster children fund is wonderful, but you can't help anyone if you're dead. Ruth felt tears spill over. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to believe I'm worth all this. Then let me believe it for you until you can believe it yourself. Patrick reached over and took her hand. You showed up for my family when we were falling apart. Let us show up for you now. The next morning, Dr. Martinez discharged Ruth with a bag full of medications, a glucose monitor, and strict instructions about diet and exercise. Patrick drove her home in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, not an uncomfortable one. The children met them at the door. Someone had made a banner that said, "Welcome home, Ruth," in crayon and glitter. Kara hugged her legs immediately. Finn carried her bag upstairs. Bridget had made soup, following a recipe she'd found online. We wanted to take care of you like you take care of us, Bridget said shyly. Ruth sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by 3 children who had become her whole world, and let herself cry. Not sad tears but grateful tears. Overwhelming, unexpected tears of belonging. Thank you, babies. She pulled all 3 of them close. Thank you for showing me what it feels like to be worth taking care of. That evening, after the children were in bed, Ruth sat with Patrick in the living room. She had always avoided this room with its expensive furniture and formal atmosphere. But Patrick had made coffee and insisted. Can I tell you something? Ruth wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I almost left. Before I collapsed, I was thinking about quitting. Why? Patrick looked shocked. Because I felt like I was causing too many problems. The DCFS investigation. The town gossip. Your mother-in-law hating me. I thought maybe everyone would be better off if I just disappeared. Ruth stared into her coffee. I've spent my whole life being told I'm too much trouble. It felt easier to believe them and leave than to stay and fight. I'm glad you didn't leave. Patrick's voice was quiet. The children would have been devastated. I would have been devastated. Would you? Ruth looked up, surprised. Ruth, you've changed everything. This house was like a tomb before you came. Cold and quiet and sad. Now there's laughter. There's warmth. There's life. Patrick set down his mug. You did that. Not because you have fancy degrees or training, but because you care. Because you show up every single day and love my children without hesitation. They're easy to love. Ruth smiled slightly. They're not, actually. They're complicated and traumatized and difficult. But you see past all that to who they really are. Patrick paused. Just like I see past what the town thinks to who you really are. And who am I? Ruth asked, genuinely curious. You're the bravest person I know. Patrick's voice was sincere. You walk through a world that constantly tells you you're not enough and you keep showing up anyway. You love people who have nothing to give you in return. You sacrifice yourself without a second thought. That's not weakness, Ruth. That's strength. Ruth felt something shift in her chest. I've never thought of myself as strong. That's because you're so busy being strong that you don't recognize it as anything special. Patrick smiled. But it is special. You're special. And I need you to start believing that. I'll try. Ruth's voice was small. It won't happen overnight. I know. But we have time. Patrick stood up. Now go to bed. You need rest. Doctor's orders. As Ruth climbed the stairs to her room, she felt different somehow. Lighter. Like she had been carrying a weight she didn't even know was there, and someone had finally helped her set it down. She had spent her whole life being not enough. But maybe, just maybe, she was exactly enough after all. 3 weeks after Ruth's collapse, Christmas approached. Ruth had never really celebrated the holiday properly. In foster care, Christmas usually meant a few donated toys and a special meal, nothing more. As an adult living alone, she'd ignored it entirely. But the O'Connor house transformed into something magical. Patrick brought home a 12-foot tree that barely fit in the entrance hall. Boxes of ornaments appeared from the attic, each one carrying memories of Christmases past. Ruth watched Patrick and the children hang decorations, noting how they would pause at certain ornaments, their faces going sad before forcing smiles back on. Mom always put the angel on top. Kara held a delicate porcelain angel, her small hands trembling. Daddy would lift her up and she would reach really high. Patrick knelt down beside his daughter. Would you like to put it up this year? Kara looked at Ruth, her gray eyes uncertain. Should Miss Ruth do it instead? No, baby. This is your family tradition. Ruth came closer. I'm here to help you keep your traditions, not replace them. But you're part of our family now. Bridget's voice was firm. You should put the angel up with Kara. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. Are you sure? We're sure. Finn grabbed Ruth's hand. Come on. Patrick lifted Kara onto his shoulders. Ruth stood beside them, steadying the little girl as she reached high to place the angel on top of the tree. The angel's white dress caught the light, casting soft shadows across the entrance hall. Mom would like that you're here. Bridget hugged Ruth's waist. She would want someone to take care of us. Someone nice. Ruth couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She just held Bridget close and watched the tree lights twinkle in the gathering dusk. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Ruth found Patrick in the study. He sat at his desk, staring at a photograph. Ruth could see it was from a Christmas past, Michelle and Patrick with the children, all of them smiling in matching pajamas. I'm sorry. I can go. Ruth started to back out. No, please. Come in. Patrick set the photo down. I could use the company. Ruth entered cautiously, sitting in one of the leather chairs across from the desk. That's a beautiful picture. It was taken 2 years ago. The last Christmas before Michelle died. Patrick's voice was rough. She picked out those matching pajamas. Made me wear them even though I felt ridiculous. She said family photos were more important than my dignity. She sounds like she was wonderful. Ruth meant it. She was. But she was also complicated. Patrick leaned back in his chair. Everyone remembers her as this perfect mother, perfect wife, perfect person. And in many ways she was. But toward the end, things were difficult between us. Ruth stayed quiet, sensing he needed to talk. She was always involved in everything. PTA, charity boards, school committees, social events. She thrived on it. But about 6 months before she died, she started pulling away. From me, from the children, from everything. Patrick rubbed his face tiredly. I tried to talk to her about it, but she said I wouldn't understand. That I was too focused on work to see what really mattered. That must have been hard. Ruth's voice was gentle. I thought we had time to fix it. I thought we'd work through it like we'd worked through other problems. Patrick's voice cracked. Then she was gone. And I never got to make things right. I never got to tell her I was sorry for being so focused on my career. I never got to ask what she needed from me. You can't blame yourself for not knowing the future. Ruth leaned forward. You loved her. That's what matters. Did I love her enough? That's what keeps me awake at night. Patrick looked directly at Ruth. I gave her a beautiful house, financial security, everything money could buy. But maybe I didn't give her enough of me. Maybe that's why she was pulling away. Or maybe she was struggling with something you couldn't have known about. Ruth chose her words carefully. Sometimes people carry pain we can't see. That's not your fault. The children blame themselves, especially Bridget. She thinks if she had been better behaved, less difficult, her mother wouldn't have been so stressed that night. Patrick's voice broke. She thinks the accident was somehow her fault because Michelle had been at a PTA meeting about Bridget's grades. Oh no. Ruth's heart ached. Does Bridget talk about that? She did once, to the therapist Catherine insisted they see. Then she clammed up and refused to go back. Patrick stood and walked to the window. That's part of why Catherine filed that complaint. She thinks I'm not getting the children proper help. That I'm just throwing money at the problem by hiring you instead of getting them real therapy. Maybe they need both. Ruth stood as well. There's no shame in therapy. But they also need someone here every day, someone consistent, someone who loves them. That's what I provide. You provide so much more than that. Patrick turned to face her. You've given them hope again. You've given me hope again. Ruth felt her breath catch. Patrick, I know this is complicated. I know we have to think about the children first. But I need you to know something. Patrick took a step closer. I'm falling in love with you, Ruth. The world seemed to stop spinning. Ruth stared at him, unable to process what she'd just heard. I know it's too soon. Patrick's words came faster, like he was afraid if he stopped talking he'd lose his courage. I know it looks bad. I know what people will say. But I can't help how I feel. Every day I watch you with my children, I watch you put them first without hesitation, I watch you love them like they're your own. And I've started to realize that what I feel for you is more than gratitude. It's more than appreciation for what you do. It's everything. Patrick, stop. Ruth held up her hand, her voice shaking. You can't. We can't. Why not? Patrick looked at her with desperate eyes. Because of what the town will say? Because of Catherine? Ruth, I don't care about any of that. Because I'm not fit for this. Ruth's voice broke. I'm not fit to be a wife to someone like you. I'm not educated enough, sophisticated enough, thin enough, anything enough. Your wife was beautiful and accomplished and everything I'm not. I can't replace her. I'm not asking you to replace her. Patrick closed the distance between them. I'm asking you to be yourself. Because yourself is exactly what I need. You're confused. You're grieving and desperate and you think you have feelings for me because I'm helping your children. Ruth backed away. That's not love, Patrick. That's gratitude. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Patrick's voice held frustration. I know the difference between gratitude and love. I've been married. I've been in love before. This is real. It can't be real because I'm nobody. Ruth felt tears streaming down her face. I'm the woman nobody wanted. I'm the woman who wasn't good enough for any man, remember? That's what I told you in the airport. That's who I am. That's who you were told you are. Patrick's voice softened. But it's not who you actually are. You're the woman who saved my family. You're the woman who loves my children unconditionally. You're the woman who makes this house feel like a home again. That's who you are, Ruth. I can't do this. Ruth turned toward the door. I'm sorry, but I can't. Ruth, wait. Patrick grabbed her hand gently. I'm not asking for anything to change right now. I'm not asking you to move into my room or marry me or anything like that. I'm just asking you to know how I feel. To think about the possibility that maybe, someday when the time is right, we could be more than what we are now. Ruth looked at their joined hands. His was large and warm, scarred from years of work before his business took off. Hers was smaller, darker, worn from years of labor and struggle. Your mother-in-law will lose her mind. Ruth's voice was barely audible. Catherine will adjust or she won't. That's her choice. Patrick squeezed Ruth's hand. My children's happiness is more important than her approval. My happiness is more important than her approval. The town will say I planned this. They'll say I came here to trap you to get your money. Ruth met his eyes. They already think that. This will confirm it. Let them think what they want. Patrick's voice was fierce. I know the truth. You know the truth. The children know the truth. That's all that matters. But what about Michelle? Ruth pulled her hand away. She's only been gone 8 months. Don't you need more time to grieve? Patrick was quiet for a long moment. I've been grieving for longer than 8 months if I'm honest. I grieved our marriage falling apart in the months before she died. I grieved the woman she used to be, the connection we used to have. Her death was devastating, but our relationship had already died before that. I just didn't want to admit it. That doesn't mean you're ready for something new. Ruth wrapped her arms around herself. Patrick, you're vulnerable right now. You're lonely and scared and trying to hold everything together. I don't want to be the person you turn to because I'm convenient. You're not convenient. You're essential. Patrick's voice held conviction. But you're right that I'm not ready for a relationship. Neither are you, honestly. We're both too broken right now. But that doesn't change how I feel. And I needed you to know. Why? Ruth asked. Why did you need me to know? Because I don't want you to think you're just an employee. I don't want you to think you're just here to take care of my children. You're more than that to me. To all of us. Patrick sat back down in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't expect you to feel the same way. I just needed to be honest. Ruth stood in the doorway, her mind and heart at war. Part of her wanted to run to him, to admit that she had started developing feelings too, that every smile from him made her heart race, that she lay awake at night thinking about what it would be like to be truly part of this family. But another part of her, the part that had been rejected and hurt and told she wasn't enough, screamed at her to protect herself. To not hope for things she couldn't have. To remember her place. I need time to think. Ruth's voice was steady despite the turmoil inside. This is a lot, Patrick. I know. Take all the time you need. Patrick managed a small smile. I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you, I hope. I promise to stay for the children. That hasn't changed. Ruth took a deep breath. But everything else? I don't know. She left the study and climbed the stairs to her room. Once inside, she sat on her bed and let herself cry. Not sad tears exactly, but confused, overwhelmed tears. Patrick O'Connor was falling in love with her. A billionaire. A widower. The father of the children she had come to love like her own. And he claimed it was real, not gratitude or loneliness or desperation. Ruth looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a curvy black woman in her 30s, dressed in sweatpants and an old shirt, her hair in a simple ponytail. She saw someone ordinary. Someone unremarkable. Someone who didn't belong in a mansion with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. How could Patrick see anything worth loving in this reflection? But then she thought about the past 6 weeks. She thought about breakfast together and homework help and bedtime stories. She thought about Patrick's tired smile when he came home from work and found dinner ready. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious. Maybe he really did see something in her. Something she couldn't see in herself yet. Ruth pulled out her phone and looked at the text messages Patrick had sent over the past weeks. Grateful messages about the children's progress. Updates from work about when he'd be home. Simple messages that said, "Thank you for everything you do." She had saved every single one. Maybe she was falling in love too. Maybe that's why his confession felt less like a shock and more like something she had been hoping for without admitting it to herself. But love was terrifying. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant opening herself up to rejection again. Love meant believing she was worthy of someone wanting her. Ruth lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the children sleeping down the hall. She thought about Patrick in his study, probably wondering if he had just destroyed everything by confessing his feelings. She thought about the woman in the airport who had told her she wasn't fit for any man. The woman who had believed that was her truth, her destiny, her identity. But maybe that woman was wrong. Maybe Ruth Johnson was exactly fit for one particular man. Maybe all her life experiences, all her pain and struggle and resilience, had been preparing her for exactly this moment, this family, this possibility of love. She didn't have answers yet. But for the first time in her life, Ruth let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved too. Have you ever been too scared to hope for something you wanted? Ruth spent her whole life believing she wasn't worthy of love. Now someone is offering it to her and she's terrified. If this story is touching your heart, please subscribe and comment below. Tell us about a time you took a chance on love or hope. Your encouragement means everything. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow covering Oak Hills and pristine white. Ruth woke early as usual, but this time she found Patrick already in the kitchen making coffee. Merry Christmas. His smile was tentative, careful. They hadn't talked about his confession in the 3 days since it happened. Merry Christmas. Ruth tied her robe tighter. I was going to start breakfast. I wanted to do something for you for once. Patrick gestured to the table where he had laid out ingredients. Though I have to admit, I'm not sure what to do with all this. Ruth laughed despite her nervousness. Let me help before you burn the house down. They worked together in comfortable silence, making pancakes and bacon and scrambled eggs. Ruth was acutely aware of Patrick's presence beside her, the way his arm brushed hers when he reached for the spatula, the way he smiled when she caught his hand before he added way too much salt to the eggs. The children thundered down the stairs at 7, drawn by the smell of breakfast and the excitement of presents. They ate quickly, barely tasting their food, then dragged the adults to the living room where gifts were piled under the tree. Ruth had bought small, thoughtful presents for each child with her first paycheck. A journal for Bridget, who had started writing poetry. A science kit for Finn, who loved experiments. A craft set for Kara, who spent hours drawing. She hadn't expected anything for herself. So when Patrick handed her a large box, her hands trembled as she took it. "Patrick, you didn't have to." Ruth set the box on her lap. "Open it." Kara bounced excitedly. Inside was a thick winter coat, deep blue and obviously expensive. Underneath were gloves, a scarf, and boots that actually fit properly. At the very bottom was a small envelope. Ruth opened the envelope to find a card with a simple message in Patrick's handwriting. "Thank you for being our family. Love, Patrick, Bridget, Finn, and Kara." "The coat is because yours had holes in it." Patrick's voice was gentle. "And the boots because I noticed yours were worn through. And the card because we all wanted you to know how much you mean to us." Ruth pressed the card to her chest, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. "Do you like it?" Kara asked anxiously. "I love it." Ruth's voice was thick with tears. "It's the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." The rest of Christmas Day passed in a warm blur. They watched movies and played board games. Ruth made a turkey dinner that filled the house with delicious smells. They laughed and talked and enjoyed each other's company. For the first time in her life, Ruth felt like she was part of a real family. Not a temporary placement. Not a job. But an actual family. That evening, after the children had gone to bed exhausted from excitement, Patrick found Ruth in the kitchen cleaning up. "Leave the dishes. Nancy will do them tomorrow." Patrick took the sponge from her hand. "I don't mind." Ruth tried to take it back. "I know you don't. But it's Christmas. Take a break." Patrick smiled. "Besides, I wanted to talk to you about something." Ruth's stomach tightened. "Okay." "The children's school is having a winter dance next week. They want me to chaperone." Patrick leaned against the counter. "I was hoping you'd come with me." "As my date." "As your date." Ruth's voice rose. "Patrick, I thought we were taking time." "We are. But this isn't about rushing into a relationship. It's about showing the community that you're important to us. That you're not just hired help." Patrick's voice was earnest. "Plus, the children want you there. They already told their friends you'd be coming." "What did their friends say?" Ruth asked, already knowing the answer. "Some of them are excited. Some of them are confused. Some of them probably heard things from their parents." Patrick grimaced. "But the children don't care. They want their family there together." "Their family." Ruth tested the words. "Is that what we are?" "That's what we've been for weeks now." Patrick took her hand carefully, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. "I know you're scared. I know this is complicated. But can you at least come to the dance? Not as my girlfriend or my anything. Just as Ruth, who the children love and want there." Ruth looked at their joined hands. She thought about Bridget, Finn, and Kara. She thought about their excited faces when they talked about the dance. She thought about disappointing them. "Okay." Ruth squeezed his hand. "I'll go." The next week passed in a flurry of preparation. Ruth had never been to a school dance as an adult. She didn't know what to wear or how to act. Bridget helped her pick out a simple green dress from the back of her closet, something Ruth had bought at a thrift store years ago for a job interview but never wore. The night of the dance, Ruth stood in front of her mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress actually fit nicely, emphasizing her curves in a way that felt both flattering and uncomfortable. She had done her hair carefully, letting her natural curls frame her face. She wore the tiniest bit of makeup, just enough to feel put together. "You look beautiful." Bridget stood in the doorway, wearing a purple dress with sparkles. "Thank you, baby." Ruth turned from the mirror. "You look beautiful too." "Dad's waiting downstairs. He got really dressed up. I think he's nervous." Bridget giggled. "He changed his tie 3 times." They walked downstairs together. Patrick stood in the entrance hall wearing a dark suit, his hair neatly combed. When he saw Ruth, he froze. "Wow." The word escaped before he could stop it. Ruth felt her cheeks warm. "Is it too much?" "It's perfect." Patrick's voice held awe. "You're perfect." Finn and Kara came running down the stairs, both dressed in their best clothes. "Let's go. We're going to be late." The school gymnasium had been transformed with lights and decorations. A DJ played music in one corner while tables of snacks lined the walls. Children ran everywhere, their energy infectious. Ruth noticed the stairs immediately. Other parents watched her and Patrick walk in together, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Catherine Walsh stood near the punch bowl, her face going white when she saw them. "Ignore them." Patrick took Ruth's hand. We're here for the children. Bridget, Finn, and Kara immediately ran off to find their friends. Ruth and Patrick stood awkwardly by the entrance, surrounded by whispering parents. Jennifer Matthews approached first, her smile plastic. Patrick, how nice to see you. And Ruth, what a colorful dress. Thank you. Ruth kept her voice neutral. I'm surprised you came. This is really more of a parents' event. Jennifer's tone made it clear that Ruth didn't count as a parent. Ruth is family. Patrick's voice was firm. She has every right to be here. Of course. Jennifer's smile didn't waver. Though I hope you're being careful. People talk, you know. About the new caregiver who moved in so quickly after Michelle's death. About how convenient it all is. What exactly are you implying? Patrick's voice grew cold. Nothing at all. I'm just concerned for your children's well-being. Michelle was such a wonderful mother. It must be hard for them to see someone so different trying to fill her shoes. Jennifer looked Ruth up and down. No offense intended, of course. None taken. Ruth's voice was steady even though she wanted to cry. Because I'm not trying to fill Michelle's shoes. I'm walking alongside the children in my own shoes. There's a difference. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. Before she could respond, Bridget appeared at Ruth's side. Miss Ruth, will you dance with me? They're playing my favorite song. Bridget grabbed Ruth's hand. Of course, baby. Ruth let herself be pulled onto the dance floor, grateful for the escape. They danced together, Bridget spinning and laughing. Other children joined them. Soon Ruth was surrounded by kids, all wanting to dance with the fun grown-up who didn't care about looking silly. From the sidelines, Ruth saw Patrick laughing. She also saw Catherine Walsh approaching him, her expression stormy. But Ruth focused on the children. On Bridget's joy. On Finn doing ridiculous robot moves that made everyone giggle. On Kara dancing with her friends, no longer the shy, scared little girl who wet the bed every night. After several songs, Ruth excused herself to get some water. She was heading to the punch bowl when she overheard two teachers talking behind a decorative screen. Can you believe Patrick brought her here? As if she belongs. I know. She's the hired help. She should know her place. I heard she's a gold digger. That she's after his money. Well, she picked the right target. Patrick's one of the wealthiest men in Oak Hills. Though I can't imagine what he sees in someone like her. Desperation probably. Men will take what's available when they're grieving. Ruth stood frozen, the words hitting her like physical blows. She had known people thought these things, but hearing them spoken so casually was different. That's enough. A sharp voice cut through the gossip. Ruth looked up to see Miss Peterson, Kara's teacher. You should both be ashamed of yourselves. We were just talking. One of the teachers looked embarrassed. You were being cruel and judgmental about someone who has done nothing but love those children. Miss Peterson's voice was icy. I've taught Kara for 4 months. Before Ruth came, that little girl was falling apart. She cried every day. She couldn't focus. She was having accidents in class because she was so anxious. Now, she's thriving. She's happy. She's confident. That's because of Ruth. We didn't mean anything by it. The second teacher tried to defend herself. You meant exactly what you said. And it's ugly. Miss Peterson noticed Ruth standing there. Ruth, I'm so sorry you heard that. It's okay. Ruth's voice was surprisingly steady. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be used to it. Miss Peterson walked over to her. I want you to know that not everyone feels that way. Some of us see what you're doing for that family and we're grateful. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. The two gossiping teachers slunk away, their faces red. Ruth got her water and returned to Patrick's side. Everything okay? He looked at her with concern. Fine. Ruth didn't want to ruin the evening by telling him what she'd heard. But Catherine Walsh had other plans. She approached them with purpose, her face tight with anger. Patrick, I need to speak with you. Privately. Catherine's voice was sharp. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Ruth. Patrick crossed his arms. Fine. I'll speak plainly then. Catherine turned to Ruth. You need to leave this family alone. You've inserted yourself into their lives, manipulated Patrick while he's vulnerable, and you're destroying Michelle's legacy. Catherine, that's enough. Patrick's voice was dangerous. No, it's not enough. Someone has to protect these children since you clearly won't. Catherine's voice rose. This woman is using you. Can't you see that? She's after your money, your status, your everything. And you're too blind with grief to realize it. I'm not blind. Patrick stepped between Ruth and Catherine. I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in months. Ruth saved this family. She showed up when no one else would. She loves my children without asking for anything in return. She's been investigated by DCFS and passed with flying colors. She's been judged and criticized by this entire town and she hasn't run away. What more does she need to do to prove she's genuine? She needs to leave. Catherine's voice broke. She needs to let my grandchildren heal without some stranger trying to replace their mother. I'm not trying to replace anyone. Ruth finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. I loved your daughter even though I never met her because she gave life to 3 beautiful children who I now love. I'm not trying to erase her memory. I'm trying to help her children survive without her. You don't get to talk about my daughter. Catherine's face crumpled. You don't get to pretend you knew her or loved her. You're nothing like her. You'll never be like her. You're right. I'm nothing like her. Ruth's voice was steady despite the pain. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the children need something different now. Not better, not worse, just different. Catherine stared at Ruth for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away, her shoulders shaking. The gymnasium had gone quiet. Everyone had heard the confrontation. Ruth felt dozens of eyes on her, judging, assessing, condemning. Then Miss Peterson started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. Other teachers joined in. Some parents too. Not everyone but enough. The DJ, sensing the need for a distraction, started playing an upbeat song. Children flooded back onto the dance floor. The tension broke. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Patrick's voice was full of admiration. The way you spoke to Catherine. You didn't attack her, but you also didn't back down. She's hurting. Ruth watched Catherine leave the gymnasium. She lost her daughter. She's terrified of losing her grandchildren too. I understand that even if her methods are wrong. How can you be so compassionate to someone who's been so cruel to you? Patrick asked. Because hurt people hurt people. And I've been hurt enough to recognize it in others. Ruth took a deep breath. But I'm done letting other people's hurt control my life. I'm done believing I'm not good enough just because they say so. Good. Patrick smiled. Because you are good enough. For this family, for this life, for everything. The rest of the evening passed more smoothly. Ruth danced with all 3 children. She talked with Miss Peterson about Kara's progress. She even had a pleasant conversation with a few other parents who approached cautiously but kindly. As they drove home, the children chattering excitedly in the back seat, Ruth felt something shift inside her. She had stood up to Catherine Walsh in front of the entire community. She had defended herself without being cruel. She had shown everyone that she wasn't going anywhere. And more importantly, she was starting to believe it herself. That night, after the children were in bed, Patrick found Ruth in the kitchen making hot chocolate. Want some? She gestured to the pot. Please. Patrick sat at the kitchen table. Ruth, I'm sorry about Catherine. She had no right to say those things to you. She had every right to her feelings. She just expressed them poorly. Ruth poured 2 mugs. But I'm done letting her make me feel small. You've never been small. Patrick accepted the mug gratefully. You've always been larger than life. I'm just glad you're finally seeing that too. Ruth sat across from him, cradling her own mug. Patrick, about what you said the other night? About having feelings for me? Patrick went very still. Yes. I've been thinking about it a lot. Ruth stared into her hot chocolate. And I need you to know something. I'm terrified. Absolutely terrified. Of hoping for something I've never had. Of believing someone could actually want me. Of taking up space in a world that's always told me to make myself smaller. But. Patrick's voice was hopeful. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of believing I don't deserve good things. Ruth looked up, meeting his eyes. So if you still feel the way you said you do, if this is real and not just gratitude or loneliness, then maybe we could try. Slowly. Very slowly. Patrick's face transformed with joy. Slowly is perfect. As slow as you need. I need you to understand something, though. Ruth's voice was serious. I'm not Michelle. I'll never be Michelle. I'll make different choices, have different strengths and weaknesses, be a different kind of partner. If you're looking for a replacement for her, I can't be that. I'm not looking for a replacement. I'm looking for you. Patrick reached across the table and took her hand. Just you, exactly as you are. Ruth felt tears slide down her cheeks. Even though I'm not fit for any man? Even though I'm too big, too poor, too uneducated, too everything that's wrong? Especially because of all those things. Patrick squeezed her hand. Because those things made you who you are. Strong, compassionate, resilient, loving. You're not too anything, Ruth. You're exactly enough. For the first time in her life, Ruth let herself believe it might be true. January brought cold weather and unexpected crisis. Ruth was making breakfast on a Tuesday morning when Patrick's phone rang. She heard his voice from the study, rising in alarm. What? No, that's not possible. I have custody. I'm their father. Ruth set down the spatula and moved toward the study. Patrick stood at his desk, his face pale, his hand gripping the phone so hard his knuckles were white. Catherine filed what? Patrick's voice rose. A petition for grandparents' rights? She can't do that. She has no grounds. Ruth's stomach dropped. She knew what this meant. Catherine Walsh wasn't giving up. She was escalating. After Patrick hung up, he sat heavily in his chair. Catherine is taking me to court. She's filing for partial custody of the children, claiming I'm providing an unstable home environment. Because of me. It wasn't a question. Her petition specifically mentions inappropriate live-in relationship with unqualified caregiver and failure to properly grieve before introducing new romantic partner. Patrick's voice was bitter. My lawyer says we need to prepare for a custody evaluation. The next few weeks were a nightmare of legal proceedings. A court-appointed psychologist came to evaluate the family. She interviewed Patrick, the children, and Ruth separately. She observed them together and apart. She requested school records, medical records, financial records, everything. The children knew something was wrong. They grew quiet and anxious again, some of the progress they had made slipping away. Kara started wetting the bed more frequently. Finn got into 2 fights at school. Bridget stopped talking except when directly asked a question. This is my fault. Ruth told Patrick one evening after the children were asleep. If I hadn't stayed, if I had just left like Catherine wanted, none of this would be happening. Don't you dare blame yourself. Patrick's voice was fierce. Catherine is doing this out of grief and fear, not because of anything you did wrong. My lawyer says her case is weak. Grandparents' rights cases rarely succeed when both parents are fit. But I'm not a parent. Ruth's voice was small. That's part of the problem, isn't it? I'm not their mother. I have no legal standing. I'm just the woman who moved in and complicated everything. You're the woman who saved us. Patrick pulled her close. And we're going to fight this together. The custody evaluation report came back surprisingly positive. The psychologist noted that while the situation was unconventional, the children were thriving. They showed clear attachment to both Patrick and Ruth, age-appropriate behavior, and healthy emotional development. But the report also noted concerns. The children had experienced significant trauma. The relationship between Patrick and Ruth was emotionally intense and potentially premature given the timeline of Michelle's death. The household might benefit from clearer boundaries and professional counseling for all members. The court date was set for mid-February. Patrick hired the best family law attorney in Illinois. Catherine hired an equally impressive legal team. The small hearing room was packed with lawyers, social workers, and witnesses. Ruth sat in the back, not allowed to be at Patrick's table because she wasn't family. She watched Catherine Walsh sit with her legal team, looking dignified and grieving in her black suit. Catherine's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of a grieving widower who made poor decisions in his vulnerable state. He described Ruth as an opportunist who inserted herself into the family for financial gain. He brought up Ruth's lack of education, her background in foster care, the speed with which she moved into Patrick's home. Mr. O'Connor hired Ms. Johnson less than 48 hours after meeting her in an airport. The lawyer's voice was incredulous. He allowed her to move into his home, around his children, with minimal background checking. He has since developed a romantic relationship with her, despite the children still grieving their mother. This shows poor judgment at best, dangerous instability at worst. Catherine took the stand. She spoke about Michelle, about what a wonderful mother she had been. She cried as she described her grandchildren's pain after losing their mother. She expressed concern that Patrick was moving too fast, that he was exposing the children to inappropriate relationships before they had properly healed. I don't want to take the children away from their father. Catherine's voice trembled. I just want to ensure they're protected. That they have stability. That they're not subjected to a revolving door of women while Patrick searches for a replacement for my daughter. Patrick's lawyer cross-examined her carefully. Mrs. Walsh, you filed a complaint with DCFS about Ms. Johnson's care of the children, correct? Yes. Catherine lifted her chin. I had concerns. Concerns that were investigated thoroughly and found to be without merit? The lawyer's voice was sharp. In fact, the DCFS investigator's report praised Ms. Johnson's care of the children, didn't she? The investigator was fooled, just like my son-in-law. Catherine's voice turned bitter. That woman is very good at pretending to care. Or perhaps she genuinely does care, and you simply can't accept that anyone other than your daughter could love those children? The lawyer let the question hang. Patrick took the stand next. He spoke calmly about his children's deterioration after Michelle's death. He described 4 professional nannies who refused the position before Ruth agreed to help. He detailed the dramatic improvement in the children's behavior, grades, and emotional state since Ruth arrived. I understand this looks unconventional. Patrick's voice was steady. I understand that some people think I moved too fast. But my children were drowning. Ruth threw them a lifeline. And yes, in the process of watching her love my children selflessly, I developed feelings for her. I don't apologize for that. Are you in a romantic relationship with Ms. Johnson? Catherine's lawyer asked sharply. We're exploring the possibility of a relationship, yes. Slowly and carefully, with the children's well-being as our primary concern. Patrick met the lawyer's eyes. But even if I weren't romantically interested in Ruth, I would still want her in my children's lives. She's been more consistent and loving than anyone else except me. The children were brought in separately. The judge spoke to each one gently, asking about their feelings, their home life, their relationship with Ruth and their grandmother. Bridget was articulate and clear. Miss Ruth loves us. Grandma Catherine used to love us too, but now she's just angry all the time. I want Miss Ruth to stay. Finn was more emotional. Grandma Catherine filed that mean complaint that made the DCFS lady come to our house. That scared us. Miss Ruth never did anything to scare us. She just takes care of us. Kara was heartbreaking in her simplicity. I love Miss Ruth. She makes me feel safe. Please don't take her away. After the children left, the judge called Beverly Thompson, the DCFS investigator. She testified about her thorough investigation, her surprise at finding a household that functioned so well, her opinion that Ruth was an unconventional but highly effective caregiver. Then, unexpectedly, Miss Peterson from the school requested to testify. She described the dramatic change in Kara's behavior, from an anxious, tearful child to a confident, happy student. In my 15 years of teaching, I've never seen such a complete turnaround. Miss Peterson's voice was firm. Whatever Ms. Johnson is doing, it's working. These children are thriving under her care. Finally, the psychologist who had done the custody evaluation testified. She noted the genuine attachment between Ruth and the children, the healthy family dynamic, the children's clear preference to maintain the current situation. While the timeline may seem rushed to outside observers, the children's emotional development suggests they feel secure and loved. The psychologist looked directly at the judge. Disrupting this stability now could undo months of healing. Catherine's lawyer tried to argue that stability could be maintained with his client having partial custody, allowing the children to spend significant time away from Ruth's influence. But even as he argued, Ruth could see he knew it was a losing battle. The judge listened to everything, asked probing questions, and finally called for a recess to consider her decision. Ruth sat in the hallway with Patrick, both of them too nervous to speak. The children waited with a social worker in another room. Catherine Walsh stood with her lawyers, looking smaller and older than Ruth had ever seen her. After 2 hours they were called back in. The judge looked tired but resolute. This court recognizes the grief and concern of Mrs. Catherine Walsh regarding her grandchildren. The loss of a daughter is devastating, and her desire to remain close to her grandchildren is understandable and commendable. The judge paused. However, this court also recognizes that Mr. Patrick O'Connor is a fit and loving father, and that his children are demonstrably thriving under his care and that of Ms. Ruth Johnson. Ruth held her breath. Mrs. Walsh's petition for partial custody is denied. Mr. O'Connor will retain full legal and physical custody of his children. The judge's voice was firm. However, Mrs. Walsh will be granted generous visitation rights, to be exercised at times mutually agreed upon by both parties, with the understanding that said visitation will occur in a manner that does not disparage Ms. Johnson or create conflict for the children. Catherine made a choked sound. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder. Furthermore, this court recommends family therapy for all parties, including Ms. Johnson and Mrs. Walsh, to help process grief and adjust to the family's new structure. The judge looked at Patrick. Mr. O'Connor, while this court finds no fault in your relationship with Ms. Johnson, I strongly encourage you to move slowly and deliberately, always keeping the children's emotional needs paramount. Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. Patrick's voice was thick with relief. And Mrs. Walsh. The judge turned to Catherine. Your grandchildren need you in their lives. But they need you to be a source of support, not conflict. I urge you to find a way to accept that love comes in many forms, and that Ms. Johnson's presence does not diminish your daughter's memory or your importance to these children. Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. This hearing is adjourned. The judge struck her gavel. Patrick grabbed Ruth in a tight hug. We won. God, we won. Ruth couldn't speak. She just held on to him, feeling the tension of weeks drain from her body. They had won. The children were safe. She could stay. Catherine approached slowly, her lawyers having already departed. She looked at Patrick and Ruth with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry. Catherine's voice broke. I'm so sorry. I was just so afraid of losing them like I lost Michelle. You're not losing them. Patrick's voice was gentle despite everything. They love you, Catherine. They need their grandmother. But they need Ruth too. Can you accept that? Catherine looked at Ruth for a long moment. I don't understand you. I don't understand why you stayed when everyone told you to leave. I don't understand why you love children who aren't yours. But they do love you. And I can't deny that anymore. I love them because they needed to be loved. Ruth's voice was simple and honest. That's all. There's no hidden agenda or master plan. I just saw 3 babies who were hurting and I wanted to help. Michelle would have liked you, I think. Catherine's admission was quiet. She always said I was too quick to judge people. That I needed to look deeper. I would have liked her too. Ruth meant it. She raised 3 incredible children. That says everything about the kind of person she was. Catherine nodded, unable to speak. She squeezed Patrick's hand briefly, then left. Patrick and Ruth collected the children from the social worker. All 3 children immediately asked what happened. We're staying together. Patrick knelt down so he was eye level with them. All of us. Ruth is staying, Grandma Catherine can still visit, and we're going to be okay. The children rushed into Ruth's arms. She held all 3 of them, feeling their relief and joy wash over her. I told the judge you were the best. Kara's voice was muffled against Ruth's shoulder. I told her you make the best pancakes and you always check for monsters under my bed and you never get mad when I have accidents. I told her you help me with math without making me feel stupid. Finn added. I told her you're the only person who really listens when I talk. Bridget's voice was quiet but fierce. Ruth couldn't hold back tears. I love you 3 so much. You know that, right? We love you too. Bridget spoke for all of them. And we're never letting you go. That evening, after the children were in bed exhausted from the emotional day, Patrick opened a bottle of wine. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to Ruth. To surviving Catherine Walsh's custody battle. He raised his glass. To surviving, period. Ruth clinked her glass against his. They sat in the living room, the room Ruth had once been afraid to enter because it seemed too formal and expensive. Now it felt like home. Ruth, there's something I want to ask you. Patrick set down his wine glass. Actually, it's more like a proposal. But not the kind you're thinking of. Ruth's heart rate picked up. Okay. The judge said she strongly recommends therapy for all of us. And I think she's right. I think we need help processing everything that's happened. Patrick took Ruth's hand. But I also think we need to make our family official. Not just in feeling but in action. What do you mean? Ruth was confused. I want to formally adopt you as the children's co-guardian. Give you legal standing in their lives. Make it so you can make medical decisions, sign school forms, be listed as their parent in every way that matters. Patrick's voice was intense. Because you are their parent, Ruth. Not biologically but in every way that counts. And I want that to be recognized legally. Ruth stared at him. You want to give me legal rights to your children? There are children now. Patrick corrected gently. And yes, I want you to have every right and responsibility that comes with being their parent. If you want that. If I want that? Ruth laughed, the sound somewhere between a sob and genuine amusement. Patrick, I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. And you're offering me legal proof that I belong with you and the children. Is that a yes? Patrick smiled. That's the biggest yes I've ever given to anything. Ruth set down her wine glass before she dropped it. But are you sure? This is permanent. Once you give me legal guardianship, I have real rights. Real say in their lives. I know. That's exactly what I want. Patrick pulled her close. I trust you with my children's lives, Ruth. I trust you with their hearts. I want the law to recognize what we already know is true. You're their mother now in all the ways that matter. Not their mother. Ruth corrected softly. They have a mother even if she's gone. I'm their Ruth. And that's enough. More than enough. Patrick kissed her forehead. So we'll start the paperwork tomorrow. And we'll start therapy too. All of us working through everything together. Together. Ruth tested the word. I like the sound of that. For the first time in her 32 years, Ruth Johnson felt like she had found her place. Not despite who she was, but because of who she was. The town of Oak Hills might never fully accept her. Catherine Walsh might always harbor some resentment. But none of that mattered anymore. She had a family who loved her. Children who needed her. A man who saw her worth. And legal documents that would soon prove she belonged. The woman who wasn't fit for any man had found a family who knew she was exactly fit for them. Spring arrived in Oak Hills with blooming flowers and warming temperatures. 6 months had passed since Ruth had walked into the O'Connor family's life at the airport. In that time, everything had changed. The legal co-guardianship papers had been finalized in March. Ruth now had official status as the children's legal guardian alongside Patrick. She could sign permission slips, make medical decisions, be listed as their parent on school forms. The first time a form came home asking for mother's name, and Ruth wrote her own name instead of Michelle's, she cried for an hour. Patrick found her in the kitchen, the form clutched in her hand. I feel like I'm erasing her. Ruth's voice was thick with tears. You're not erasing anyone. You're adding yourself to the story. Patrick sat beside her. Michelle will always be their first mother. But you're their second mother. That doesn't diminish her, Ruth. It just means they're lucky enough to have been loved by two incredible women. The family therapy sessions had been difficult but healing. Dr. Rachel Okonkwo, their therapist, helped each of them process their grief and trauma. She helped the children understand that loving Ruth didn't mean forgetting Michelle. She helped Patrick work through his guilt about moving on. She helped Ruth believe she deserved the family she had found. Catherine Walsh even attended a few sessions. The relationship between her and Ruth remained complicated, but they had reached an uneasy peace. Catherine visited the children regularly, and slowly, painfully, she was learning to accept Ruth's place in their lives. In April, Patrick proposed. Not dramatically, not publicly, but quietly one evening after the children were asleep. I know we've only known each other 6 months. Patrick knelt beside the couch where Ruth was reading. I know people will say it's too fast. But I don't want to wait anymore. I want you to be my wife. I want us to be a real family in every possible way. Ruth looked at the simple diamond ring he held. It wasn't enormous or flashy. It was elegant and understated, exactly her style. The children? Ruth started. Already know. I asked their permission this morning. Patrick smiled. They were unanimously in favor. Kara actually squealed so loud I thought the windows would break. What about the town? Catherine? Everyone who already thinks I'm a gold digger. Ruth's old fears rose up. I don't care what they think. Patrick's voice was firm. I care what I know. I know you love me and my children. I know you make us all better. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Say yes, Ruth. Please say yes. Ruth thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago. Tired, broken, convinced she wasn't worthy of love. She thought about the woman she was becoming. Stronger, braver, learning to believe in her own worth. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Yes, I'll marry you. Patrick slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her. It was their first real kiss, sweet and gentle and full of promise. The children were thrilled when told the news the next morning. Bridget immediately started planning wedding details. Finn asked if he could be the best man. Cara wanted to know if she could wear a princess dress. We're going to do something small. Patrick told them. Just family and close friends. Nothing fancy. Can we have it at the airport? Cara's question was innocent but profound. That's where you and Miss Ruth met. That's where our family started. Patrick and Ruth looked at each other. That's actually perfect, Ruth said. They spent the next month planning. Patrick's business partner, Thomas Reed, seemed supportive at first. He congratulated Patrick, helped with logistics, offered to host the rehearsal dinner. Thomas was a polished man in his 50s, always impeccably dressed, always saying the right thing. He had been Patrick's partner for 10 years, helping build O'Connor Development into a multi-million-dollar company. But something about him made Ruth uncomfortable. The way he looked at her when Patrick wasn't watching. The way his congratulations felt hollow. The tight smile he wore when discussing the wedding. I don't trust Thomas. Ruth told Patrick one evening. Thomas? Why not? He's been my partner for a decade. Patrick looked surprised. I don't know. Just a feeling. Ruth couldn't explain the unease that crept over her whenever Thomas was around. He's a little stiff, I'll admit. But he's loyal. Patrick squeezed her hand. You're just nervous about the wedding. It's normal. Ruth wanted to believe him. But the feeling persisted. The engagement party was held at the O'Connor house in May. It was a small gathering, just close friends and family. Catherine Walsh came wearing a tight smile and a blue dress. Miss Peterson came genuinely happy for them. Beverly Thompson from DCFS came, proud of how the family had thrived. Thomas Reed arrived with his wife, Amanda, a thin woman who looked uncomfortable in her own skin. They brought an expensive bottle of champagne and elaborate congratulations. To Patrick and Ruth. Thomas raised his glass during the toast. May you have many happy years together. Everyone drank. But Ruth noticed Thomas's smile didn't reach his eyes. Later in the evening, Ruth overheard Thomas talking to another business associate in the study. It's a shame, really. Patrick's throwing away his reputation for some woman he barely knows. The board isn't happy. Will it affect business? The other man asked. Potentially. Patrick's judgment has been questionable since Michelle died. First the nanny situation, now this rushed wedding. I've been fielding concerns from investors for months. Thomas's voice was carefully neutral. We may need to make some changes if this continues. Ruth backed away quietly, her heart pounding. Changes? What kind of changes? She told Patrick what she'd heard that night. Thomas is just being cautious. He worries about the company's image. Patrick dismissed her concern. He'll come around once he sees how happy we are. But Ruth couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas was planning something. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th, exactly 6 months and 1 week after Ruth had met Patrick at the airport. They would exchange vows in a small chapel near O'Hare, then have a reception in one of the airport's event spaces. It was unconventional, but it felt right. Starting their marriage in the place where their story began. 3 days before the wedding, Thomas requested an emergency meeting with Patrick at the office. Patrick came home that evening looking shaken. Thomas presented the board with evidence that you married me for money. Patrick's voice was hollow. He has bank records showing you researched my net worth. He has testimony from people claiming you told them you planned to land a rich husband. He has photos of you looking up divorce lawyers online. That's not true. Ruth's voice shook. I never researched your net worth. I never told anyone I wanted to marry rich. And I've never looked up divorce lawyers. I know it's not true. But Thomas has convinced half the board it is. Patrick sat heavily on the couch. They're threatening to vote me out as CEO if I marry you. They say I'm compromised, my judgment is impaired, I'm making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. Then don't marry me. The words tore out of Ruth. Don't lose your company because of me. Are you insane? I'm not calling off the wedding. Patrick grabbed her hands. That company means nothing compared to you and the children. But you built that company. You can't just walk away. Ruth felt tears streaming down her face. Watch me. Patrick's voice was steel. I'll build another company if I have to. But I'm not giving you up. Not for Thomas Reed, not for the board, not for anyone. The next day, Finn came home from school with news. Matthew Henderson told me his dad works with Mr. Reed. He said Mr. Reed told them you're a con artist, Miss Ruth. He said you're going to steal all our money and leave. Ruth felt sick. Matthew's dad is on the company board? I punched Matthew. Finn's voice was matter-of-fact. The principal called Dad. I'm suspended again. Finn, you can't keep punching people who say bad things about Ruth. Patrick sighed. Why not? You said we're supposed to defend our family. Finn's logic was unassailable. That evening Bridget pulled Ruth aside. I found something on the computer. She handed Ruth a printout. Mr. Reed searched for divorce lawyers. Not you. And he used Dad's computer to do it so it would look like you did it. Ruth stared at the printout. It showed the search history from Patrick's office computer, with timestamps that matched when Thomas had been alone in the office. How did you find this? Ruth asked. I'm good with computers. Dad doesn't know, but I can access his work stuff from home. Bridget looked proud. I wanted to prove Mr. Reed was lying. Ruth hugged Bridget tight. You're amazing. But don't hack into your dad's work computer anymore, okay? But I proved he's lying. Bridget protested. You did. And I'm so proud of you. But let the adults handle it from here. Ruth took the printout to Patrick immediately. Patrick stared at the evidence, his face going red with rage. Thomas set me up. He wanted it to look like you were planning our divorce before we even got married. But why? Ruth asked. Why would he sabotage you like this? Because if I step down or get voted out, Thomas becomes CEO. He gets control of the company I built. Patrick's hands shook with anger. He's been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity. Our relationship gave him the perfect weapon. The next day, Patrick called an emergency board meeting. He presented Bridget's evidence, along with further investigation that revealed Thomas had also fabricated the testimony from people claiming Ruth had gold digger aspirations. The people didn't even exist. Thomas was voted out of the company immediately. Patrick offered to buy out his shares for a generous amount, just to be rid of him quickly. You destroyed your own career out of greed. Patrick told Thomas in front of the entire board. You tried to destroy my family because you wanted my position. I hope it was worth it. Thomas left without a word, his face pale and drawn. The day before the wedding, Catherine Walsh appeared at the house. She carried a large box. I brought you something. Catherine set the box on the kitchen table. Michelle's wedding dress. I thought maybe you could use parts of it for your dress. Or not use it at all. I just wanted you to have the choice. Ruth opened the box carefully. Inside was a beautiful white dress, delicate lace over silk, preserved perfectly. I can't wear this. Ruth's voice broke. This was Michelle's. And now it's yours if you want it. Or you can wear something completely different. I just wanted you to know that Michelle would want you to have it. Catherine's voice was thick with emotion. She would want someone to love her children. And you do. So in a way you're honoring her by marrying Patrick. Ruth hugged Catherine, both women crying. It was the first real embrace they had shared. Thank you. Ruth whispered. For accepting me. Finally. Thank you for loving them when I was too blind to see you were exactly what they needed. Catherine pulled back, wiping her eyes. Now try on the dress. Let's see if we can make it work. The dress was too small in some places, too large in others. But a seamstress was able to combine Michelle's lace with new blue fabric, creating something that honored the past while celebrating the future. When Ruth looked at herself in the mirror the morning of the wedding, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress was beautiful, the bodice fitted with Michelle's lace, the skirt flowing in new blue silk. Her hair was styled in soft curls. Her makeup was subtle but elegant. You look like a princess. Cara breathed, standing in the doorway in her own blue dress. You all look like royalty. Ruth looked at Bridget in her purple dress and Finn in his tiny suit. The most beautiful royal family ever. They drove to the airport together. The chapel was small and intimate, decorated with simple white flowers. Only 20 people attended. Catherine Walsh sat in the front row, next to Patrick's parents who had flown in from Ireland. Miss Peterson came, as did Beverly Thompson, Dr. Okonkwo, and a handful of Patrick's most trusted employees who had stood by him during the Thomas Reed debacle. Patrick stood at the altar in a gray suit, his eyes bright with tears. When Ruth walked down the aisle with all 3 children, he couldn't hold back a sob. You're beautiful. He whispered when she reached him. All 4 of you. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They wrote their own vows. Patrick spoke first. Ruth, 6 months ago I was drowning. My children were drowning. We were a family falling apart with no idea how to save ourselves. Then you appeared out of nowhere and threw us a lifeline. Not because you had to, not because you expected anything in return, but because you saw people who needed help and you couldn't walk away. You've taught my children to love again. You've taught me to hope again. You've shown us all that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up and stays. I promise to show up for you the way you showed up for us. I promise to stay through everything life throws at us. I promise to love you exactly as you are, for all our days. Ruth was crying too hard to speak for a moment. She took a shaky breath and began. Patrick, I spent my whole life being told I wasn't enough. Too big, too poor, too black, too everything that didn't fit what the world wanted. I believed it. I made myself small and invisible because I thought that's what I deserved. Then I met 3 children who needed love more than they needed someone perfect. And I met a man who saw me, really saw me for the first time in my life. You didn't see my flaws or my failures. You saw someone who could love your children. And in loving them, I learned to love myself. You've given me a family, a home, a place to belong. I promise to love your children like they're mine. I promise to build a life with you that honors where we've been and celebrates where we're going. I promise to believe I'm enough, even on the days when it's hard. Because you make me believe it's true. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. The minister pronounced them husband and wife. Patrick kissed Ruth gently, then knelt down so the children could join the embrace. We're a family now. Cara announced to everyone. Officially. The reception was held in a bright event space overlooking the airport runways. They watched planes take off and land while eating cake and celebrating. It was unconventional and perfect. Catherine gave a toast that surprised everyone. When Patrick first told me he was marrying Ruth, I was angry. I thought he was making a terrible mistake. I thought no one could replace my daughter. Catherine's voice shook. But I was wrong. Ruth isn't replacing Michelle. She's continuing Michelle's legacy of love. She's showing those children that love doesn't die with the people we lose. It multiplies, it grows, it finds new ways to express itself. Ruth, you've taught me that opening your heart to new people doesn't mean forgetting the ones you've lost. Thank you for that gift. Ruth hugged Catherine, both women crying again. As the evening wound down, Ruth stood by the window watching planes take off into the sunset. Patrick came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. About 6 months ago, standing in this airport watching you with your children. Watching that nanny walk away. Deciding to take the biggest risk of my life. Ruth leaned back against him. I was terrified. Are you still terrified? Patrick kissed her temple. Sometimes. But it's different now. Ruth turned to face him. Now I'm terrified of how happy I am. Of how much I have to lose if something goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. Patrick cupped her face gently. We've been through custody battles and health crises and sabotage attempts. We've survived Catherine's wrath and Thomas's betrayal and the entire town's judgment. We can survive anything. Promise? Ruth searched his eyes. I promise. Patrick kissed her softly. We're in this together now. For better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health. You know those vows were already covered in the ceremony, right? Ruth smiled against his lips. I know, but I wanted to say them again. Just to make sure you know I mean them. Patrick pulled her closer. I love you, Ruth Johnson O'Connor. I love you too. Ruth rested her head on his chest. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. They stood together watching planes take off, symbolizing new beginnings and journeys starting. Ruth thought about her own journey. From foster care to struggle to survival to this moment. This beautiful, impossible, perfect moment. She was married. She had children who loved her. She had a man who believed in her. She had a mother-in-law who had finally accepted her. She had a community that was slowly learning to see past their prejudices. She was Ruth Johnson O'Connor. And she was enough. More than enough. She was exactly right. 9 months after the wedding, Ruth stood in the bathroom at 5 a.m, staring at a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Positive. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, her hands shaking. She and Patrick had talked about more children, but neither of them expected it to happen so quickly. Patrick knocked on the door. Ruth? Are you okay? You've been in there for 20 minutes. Ruth opened the door, holding out the test wordlessly. Patrick stared at it for a full minute before his face split into the biggest smile Ruth had ever seen. We're having a baby? We're having a baby. Ruth felt tears stream down her face. Patrick, I'm going to be a mother. An actual, biological mother. You're already a mother. Patrick pulled her into his arms. But yes, now you're going to be a biological mother too. God, Ruth. A baby. They told the children at breakfast. Ruth was so nervous she burned the pancakes. We have something to tell you 3. Patrick gathered them at the kitchen table. Ruth is pregnant. You're going to have a baby brother or sister. The reactions were mixed. Kara squealed with delight. A baby? I've always wanted a baby sister. Finn looked worried. Will you still love us if you have your own baby? Ruth's heart broke. She knelt down in front of Finn. You are my own baby. All 3 of you. This new baby isn't replacing you or more important than you. This baby is just adding to our family. You 3 will always be my first children, the ones who taught me how to be a mother. Okay. Promise. Finn's voice was small. I promise. Ruth hugged him tight. Bridget was quiet, processing. Finally she spoke. Mom would have liked this. She always said she wanted more kids. Tell me about that. Ruth sat beside Bridget. What did your mom say about wanting more children? She said she wished we had a little brother or sister. She said our family felt incomplete. Bridget's voice was wistful. But she couldn't have more kids after Kara. Something about medical stuff I didn't understand. Then maybe this baby is meant to be. Ruth took Bridget's hand. Maybe this is the little brother or sister your mom always wanted for you, just arriving in a different way than expected. Bridget smiled slightly. I like that idea. The pregnancy was difficult. Ruth's diabetes made it high risk. She had to monitor her blood sugar constantly, attend frequent doctor appointments, modify her diet even more strictly. She was exhausted all the time. But she also felt a joy she had never experienced before. Every flutter of movement, every heartbeat on the ultrasound, every milestone filled her with wonder. At 20 weeks, they learned she was having twins. A boy and a girl. Twins run in my family. Patrick looked stunned at the ultrasound screen. My grandmother was a twin. But I never expected this. Ruth laughed and cried at the same time. We're going to have 5 children, Patrick. 5. We can handle 5. Patrick squeezed her hand. We've handled everything else. The community of Oak Hills had gradually warmed to Ruth over the past year. The dramatic improvement in the O'Connor children's well-being was impossible to ignore. Teachers praised Ruth at school events. Other parents slowly stopped gossiping. Even Jennifer Matthews managed a stiff but genuine congratulations when she heard about the pregnancy. Catherine Walsh was overjoyed. More grandchildren. Oh, Michelle would be so happy. Ruth suggested they name the girl Michelle, after Patrick's late wife. Patrick cried when she offered. Are you sure? He asked. I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure. She was their mother first. This honors her memory. Ruth's hand rested on her growing belly. Besides, I like the idea of a little Michelle running around carrying on her legacy. They named the boy Ryan after Ruth's favorite foster parent, the woman who had taught her to cook. The remaining months of pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation. They converted 2 guest rooms into nurseries. The older children helped pick out decorations. Bridget insisted on purple walls for Michelle's room. Finn chose blue for Ryan's. Ruth's health became more complicated as the pregnancy progressed. She developed preeclampsia in her 8th month and was put on bed rest. Patrick took time off work. The children helped with everything, bringing Ruth meals and keeping her company. I feel useless. Ruth told Dr. Martinez during a home visit. I'm supposed to be taking care of everyone, and instead everyone is taking care of me. Taking care of each other is what families do. Dr. Martinez checked her blood pressure, frowning at the reading. Ruth, we need to talk about delivery. With the preeclampsia and your diabetes, I'm recommending a C-section at 36 weeks. Waiting longer is too risky. 36 weeks? Ruth felt panic rise. That's only 2 weeks away. I know. But the babies are measuring well. They should be fine. Dr. Martinez sat beside her bed. I won't lie, this is going to be complicated. But you're strong. You've survived much harder things than this. The night before the scheduled C-section, Ruth couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs at 2 in the morning and found Patrick in the kitchen. Couldn't sleep either? He asked, pouring her a glass of water. Too nervous. Ruth sat at the kitchen table. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't handle twins on top of 3 other children? What if I'm not enough? Ruth. Patrick sat beside her, taking her hands. Look at me. You are more than enough. You've been more than enough since the day I met you in that airport. Tomorrow you're going to bring 2 more beautiful babies into this world. And yes, it's going to be hard. But we're going to do it together. All of us. I never thought I'd have this. Ruth's voice broke. A husband who loves me. Children who need me. A home that's really mine. Babies growing inside me. I spent so many years believing I didn't deserve any of this. You deserve all of it and more. Patrick kissed her forehead. You deserve every good thing that comes your way. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that. The C-section the next morning went smoothly. Michelle Ruth O'Connor arrived first, screaming lustily, weighing 5 pounds 2 ounces. Ryan James O'Connor followed 3 minutes later, quieter but healthy, weighing 5 pounds even. Ruth held both babies in the recovery room, tears streaming down her face. They're perfect. Look at them, Patrick. They're perfect. They're beautiful. Just like their mother. Patrick took dozens of photos, his own eyes wet with tears. Bridget, Finn, and Cara came to visit that afternoon. They crowded around the hospital bed, staring at their new siblings with wonder. They're so tiny. Cara whispered. Can I hold one? Ruth carefully handed baby Michelle to Cara, supporting the infant's head. Very gently. Just like that. Cara looked at the baby with such love that Ruth felt her heart might burst. Hi, Michelle. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything I know. Finn held Ryan with surprising gentleness for an 8-year-old boy. He looks like Dad. See his nose? He does. Patrick smiled. And Michelle looks like Ruth. Bridget didn't say much, just stood close, looking at both babies with an expression Ruth couldn't quite read. Later, after Patrick took the younger children to get snacks, Bridget approached Ruth quietly. Can I tell you something? Bridget's voice was hesitant. Always, baby. Ruth shifted carefully in the hospital bed. I'm glad you had babies. I'm glad they're going to know you're their mom from the very beginning. Bridget's eyes filled with tears. Because you're my mom too now. And I wanted you to have babies who never had to wonder if you would stay. Ruth started crying again. Come here. Bridget carefully climbed onto the bed, avoiding Ruth's incision. Ruth held her tight. You're one of the best things that ever happened to me. Ruth whispered into Bridget's hair. All three of you are. These babies don't make you any less mine. They just make our family bigger. I know. Dad and Dr. Okonkwo told me that. But I needed to hear it from you. Bridget pulled back. I love you, Mom. It was the first time any of the children had called Ruth, Mom. Ruth couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She just held Bridget and cried happy tears. They brought the twins home 3 days later. The house was chaos. 2 infants needing feeding every 3 hours. Ruth's incision healing slowly. Patrick trying to help while also managing work. The older children trying to adjust to the noise and disruption. But it was beautiful chaos. Catherine Walsh came by every day helping with laundry and cooking and baby care. She and Ruth had formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared love for the children. I judged you so harshly, Catherine said one afternoon while holding baby Ryan. I'm ashamed of how I treated you. You were grieving. You were protecting your grandchildren the only way you knew how. Ruth adjusted baby Michelle's blanket. I understand that now. You're more forgiving than I deserve. Catherine smiled slightly. But I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful you let me be part of this family despite everything. You're their grandmother. You'll always be part of this family. Ruth meant it. 6 months later, Ruth stood in front of Oak Hills Elementary School, watching Cara perform in the spring concert. Baby Michelle slept in a carrier on Ruth's chest while Patrick held baby Ryan. Bridget and Finn sat beside them, fidgeting excitedly. Cara sang her solo beautifully, her voice clear and confident. When she finished, she waved at Ruth specifically, her smile bright enough to light the room. After the concert, Miss Peterson approached. Ruth, I wanted to tell you something. Cara's reading scores came back. She tested at the top of her class. Actually, all 3 of your older children are exceeding expectations academically and socially. Thank you for telling me. Ruth felt pride swell in her chest. I know it's been hard to juggle everything with the twins, but you're doing an amazing job. Those children are thriving because of you. Miss Peterson squeezed Ruth's arm gently. The whole school sees it. Even the people who doubted you at first. That evening, Ruth returned to the airport for the first time since the wedding. Patrick had helped her organize something special. The O'Connor Foundation for Foster Children was launching that night. Ruth had used part of her salary and some of Patrick's resources to create a foundation that would help teenagers aging out of foster care. They would provide scholarships, job training, housing assistance, mentorship, and emotional support. The launch event was held in the same space where they had held their wedding reception. Over 100 people attended, including social workers, former foster children, community leaders, and donors. Ruth stood at the podium, nervous but determined. Baby Michelle was with Catherine, and baby Ryan with Patrick's mother. The older children sat in the front row with Patrick, all of them wearing proud smiles. Thank you all for coming. Ruth's voice shook slightly. 18 years ago, I aged out of foster care with a garbage bag full of belongings and no idea what to do next. I was told I wasn't fit for anything. That I should be grateful for whatever I could get. That I should expect very little from life. Ruth paused, looking at her family in the front row. But I didn't accept that. I worked hard. I survived. And then one day in this very airport, I met 3 children who needed help. I had nothing to offer except love and determination. But it turned out that was exactly what they needed. Ruth smiled. This foundation exists because I remember what it feels like to be 18 and alone. I remember wondering if anyone would ever believe in me. I want to be that person for other kids aging out of care. I want to show them they're fit for anything they dream of. The audience applauded. Ruth told her story, not hiding the hard parts, not pretending it was easy. She talked about the prejudice, the doubt, the constant struggle to believe in herself. But here's what I learned. Ruth's voice grew stronger. Being told you're not enough doesn't make it true. Being judged by people who don't know your story doesn't define your worth. Being different, being unexpected, being unconventional doesn't mean being less. Sometimes it means being exactly what the world needs, even if the world doesn't know it yet. A young woman in the audience stood up. She looked to be about 19 with nervous eyes and fidgeting hands. Can I say something? Of course. Ruth nodded. I aged out of foster care last year. I'm one of the first recipients of a scholarship from this foundation. The young woman's voice trembled. I was living in my car, working 3 jobs, trying to save enough for community college. Then Miss Ruth found me through a social worker. She gave me a scholarship, helped me find housing, connected me with a mentor. She changed my life. The young woman was crying now. When I first met her, I thought she was too good to be true. I thought there had to be a catch. But there was no catch. She just wanted to help because she remembered being me. She's the first person who ever believed I could do more than just survive. Ruth was crying too. The young woman came up to the podium and hugged her tight. Thank you. The young woman whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me help. Ruth whispered back. The rest of the evening was a blur of introductions and conversations and promising new connections. By the time they got home, Ruth was exhausted but happy. She put the twins down, checked on the older children, and found Patrick on the back porch. That was incredible. Patrick pulled her into his arms. The way you told your story. The way you connected with all those kids. Ruth, you're going to change so many lives. I hope so. Ruth leaned against him. I just want them to know they're worth fighting for. That they're worth believing in. Like I believed in you. Patrick kissed the top of her head. Like you believed in me. Ruth agreed. Even when I didn't believe in myself. They stood together in the quiet darkness, listening to the sounds of their home. Babies sleeping peacefully. Older children whispering and giggling in their rooms. The gentle hum of a house full of life and love. Ruth thought about the woman she had been 14 months ago. Standing in the airport baggage claim, watching a desperate father and 3 broken children, deciding to take a chance on them even though everyone said she wasn't qualified. That woman had been terrified. That woman had believed she wasn't fit for any man, wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy. But that woman had been wrong. Or maybe she had been right in a way. Maybe Ruth Johnson really wasn't fit for any man. Maybe she was fit for one very specific man, and 3 heartbroken children, and now 2 tiny babies. Maybe being not fit for everyone meant being perfectly fit for someone. Ruth had found her someone. Actually, she had found her someones. Multiple someones who loved her, needed her, believed in her. She had a family. A real, legal, permanent family. She had children who called her mom. She had a husband who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. She had a foundation that would help other forgotten kids find their worth too. She had everything she never dared to hope for. And she had earned every bit of it, not through luck or manipulation or gold digging, but through showing up every single day and loving people who needed to be loved. What are you thinking about? Patrick asked, feeling her go still in his arms. I'm thinking about how far I've come. Ruth's voice was soft. From a baggage handler with nothing to a woman with everything. From invisible to seen. From not enough to more than enough. You were always more than enough. Patrick turned her to face him. You just needed someone to show you. No. Ruth corrected gently. I needed to show myself. You and the children helped, but ultimately I had to decide to believe it was true. And I do now. I finally do. She looked up at the stars, thinking about Michelle O'Connor. The woman whose death had created space for Ruth in this family. The woman whose children Ruth now loved as her own. The woman whose name would be carried on by the tiny baby girl sleeping upstairs. Thank you, Michelle. Ruth whispered to the stars. Thank you for loving them first. Thank you for teaching them how to love. Thank you for making them who they are. I promise I'll take care of them. I promise I'll honor your memory. I promise they'll always know how much you loved them. The wind rustled through the trees, soft and gentle, almost like a whisper of approval. Patrick heard her and smiled. She would have liked you, you know. She would have been grateful it was you who found us. I hope so. Ruth leaned into Patrick's warmth. I really hope so. They went inside together, checking on all 5 children one last time before heading to their own room. Ruth stood in the doorway of each room watching her children sleep. Bridget, curled up with a book on her chest. Finn, sprawled across his bed like a starfish. Kara, peaceful and dry, no nightmares tonight. Michelle and Ryan, sleeping side by side in their cribs, tiny and perfect. Her children. All of them. Hers. Ruth Johnson O'Connor. Mother to 5. Wife to 1. Founder of a foundation. Survivor of foster care. Overcomer of prejudice. Believer in her own worth. She was not fit for any man. But she was exactly fit for this man, these children, this life. And that was more than enough. It was everything.